right, welcome back to the IMNerd podcast. I'm your host, Freeway. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Kenny.
Hello.
And we have two special guests, two people that I am very fond of in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. I've known one of them since he was a child, and the other I met basically through starting the IMNerd podcast, who's just been a supporter of the podcast and stuff like that. We have Marcus Hayden, a fellow YCS champion and an ARG champion, and we also have Pudding, who is the innovator of the fairy deck that is like, in my opinion, the best fairy deck in Edison format. I think it's the only viable one, especially now that the format has sped up so drastically with Gigavice and Frog OTK. But we are not here today to talk about Edison, at least not the main focus. There will be comparisons made and things like that. But we are talking about this format, September 2012, which is being coined as REDU format, I believe, guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why don't we? I'm gonna give the floor to you guys. You even one of you can start. Just kind of introduce us to what this format is, because it's gaining popularity. I noticed, at least some people are talking about it more. It's very popular because it has a lot of popular decks, but why don't you guys just kind of introduce it a little bit?
You want to do it, or?
Yeah, I'll take the lead. So I guess September 2012 format specifically is right after the September 1st ban list in 2012, but prior to the release of Abyss Rising, but right after the release of Return of the Duelist. That's why we call it REDU format, actually coined by Pudding himself. He came up with the name. And yeah, it is just a very diverse format because the four major decks of the previous format all get nerfed, and basically it allows all the prior decks to kind of catch up in power level, as well as the release of a new set at the time, which gave us Geargia, Spellbooks, some Dolce cards. But it's their first wave of support for so none of those archetypes are like crazy yet either.
Right.
And it's just a very diverse format, and it's a whole lot of fun because in my head, the extra deck's still extremely weak at this point in time in Yu-Gi-Oh! At least in terms of XYZs. So it does feel very similar to Edison, because like in Edison format, we don't have Trish, we don't have Scrap Dragon, we don't have, like a lot of these utility XYZs so you have to be very unique with how you answer boards and whatnot. And it's kind of similar with the extra deck for this version of XYZs, because you have to you don't have like direct answers. We don't have like Diamond Dire Wolf or Abyss Rising. So you can't just answer the board or graveyards, in a very direct way. You have to be very creative with how you're doing so. And yeah, so I truly see it as like the XYZ era equivalent to Edison format. And that's why I'm liking it a lot.
So this takes place after Nationals of 2012. When Nationals, the big four decks were Inzektor, Macro Rabbit or Rabbit, Chaos Dragons, and Wind Up, right? Those are the big four coming out of that. Yeah. Obviously, I competed in 2012 Nationals. Actually played windups. I played hand loop windups, and I was like undefeated day one. That format, I never want to revisit because it's just honestly like it's the same as wanting to play like Dragon Rulers with the babies. It's a very overpowered format. So you're saying that all four of those decks got neutered going into this format September 2012, and they're not as insane. Like some of the changes on the ban list, I believe, I was talking to Stango about this because Stango and Luke Feeney actually have been playing around with REDU format a little bit in our Discord server, and one of them was playing Inzektors, just trying decks out. One of them was playing Inzektor. I think Luke was playing windups. He loves windups, and Inzektor has like one Hornet, one Dragonfly or something like that. Yep. What nerf did windups get for this format?
They only have one carrier, so they can't handle you anymore.
Oh, that's really, really big, actually, yeah. And Chaos Dragons, they're also nerfed in some way, I guess?
They don't have Future Fusion, which was like the auto-win button, and they have one Red Ice and one Sword.
I love this. And then, last but not least, what was the other deck? Rabbit? Rabbit is at 2, right?
Rabbit's at 2, yes. And Tour Guide is at 2. So if you want to play Tour Guide and resolve it twice in a game, you have to fit a shitty card in your deck, like Night Assailant or Tour Bus.
Right, right. So I'm looking at you guys made a tier list over on the Metaphos YouTube channel. Guys, if you're listening to this, subscribe to Metaphos, Marcus Hayden's channel. It's a great channel, a lot of content. He's doing a lot of REDU content. And this is kind of where I learned of this format. I also heard about it from Pudding years ago, like at least a year ago. Pudding brought this up to me, and at the time Edison was like super thriving, and I was like, I'm not even remotely interested in another format right now. And there's no shade to Pudding, obviously, but I get asked a lot, as you guys can imagine, about other formats, and oftentimes I'm just like, yeah, I get the allure, I get why people want to play it, but right now I'm just trying to focus on Edison, make Edison as big as it is. Edison is, it's a well-oiled machine now, right? Like 2025, Edison is so well oiled. That's the way I'll put it. We now have like 2 combo decks that are really ridiculous: the Gigavice deck, the Frog OTK deck, and we already had like Dragon Turbo. So Edison is going through like a different period of time where it's very chaotic, and I think the deck's power levels are just really, really strong. So some people, including myself, are kind of looking elsewhere, or just kind of like, I'm gonna be honest right now. I'm just gonna be blunt. I'm a little burnt out right now with Edison, if I'm just being completely honest, and that's because I've gone to every event in 2024. I didn't miss a single one.
Yeah.
I played in like pretty much every online tournament too of 2024. So me personally, not speaking for everyone, but me personally, I feel like I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in Edison. And now I'm really focused on my channel and just like other things, other interests are taking place. I'm really liking anime again and stuff like that. But I see this REDU format coming up and I'm like, oh, perfect. This seems like something that I could imagine exploring, because it's not solved, neither is Edison, but it's even less solved, I would say, than Edison. So How do you guys feel about, like, you made this tier list, how do you guys feel about your top 3 placements S tier? I think you have like Dark World, Wind Up, and Geargia Karakuri. Can you talk about like the best decks right now?
Sure. I think Marcus might be better to talk about Geargia. I can talk about Wind Up and stuff a little bit. The Wind Up engine, card for card, is definitely the best engine in the format. They have, like, just Magician Shark is obviously insane. It's a very famous thing that makes you go like +3, +4 when you resolve it. And they also have Factory, and Wind Up Factory plus Rabbit is really good. So I think just as a card for card engine, that deck is the best, but it also dies to like any side hate. Goes and Match, Rivalry, Maxi Veiler. So many of the side deck cards absolutely kill windups. And like, even if you get like a Shock Lock established, and there's some debate on this, we can talk about this later with Shockmaster's legality in the format, because it's legal in NA, but it wasn't actually legal in the EU. But I find Shockmaster isn't as much as a problem, because you see that card, and if you commit your deck's entire resources to making a Shock Lock, you can't MST or anything like that during that turn, because you have to call spells, dark holes in the format. Otherwise, you can just get your whole board wiped and lose all your resources for nothing. And if they flip like a Compulse on your Shockmaster, if they flip a Gozen, if they flip a Rivalry, if they have a Max C, the deck is instantly dead. And with windups, when you have those hands that are like double Magician Rat or something like that, the format also has really powerful back row that's hard to play against. But it has an amazing grind game. It's also a combo deck. You can just like summon Rabbit, use Rat effect, special something, use the Rabbit to banish the Rat, and then you get a free level 3 XYZ every turn. So it's good at grinding, good at being explosive. I'd say it's like the most well-rounded deck of the format. It's just weaker to the sideboard.
I want to interject real quick and say, for people listening, because I know some of the terminology not everyone's familiar with. I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh historian. I've been playing this game for 20 years or so. So I pretty much know like every format, or have experienced it up until 2017. When he says Shockmaster is an Xyz monster that requires 3 level 4s to make. You can detach a material and call monster, spell, or trap, and those cards cannot be played for the next turn. So like, it is one of the most ignorant Xyz monsters ever created. I think it gets banned at some point. It had to, and it's very overpowered. Like when it first premiered, like Magician Shark, which is GG. Like I remember the wind up format that first had Shockmaster, and it was like, God, if they open up Magician Shark, you just kind of lose, because they also OTK'd you on the following turn as follow-up. I don't think that's happening in this format as much, but Shockmaster is legal, and yeah, that card is... Yeah,
that's an interesting thing, though. What because I have a follow-up question to this too. But first, what about at this point in time? Did EU and NA have different ban lists?
I was wondering.
Did they not play the same?
It was a jump promo.
Yep.
And EU didn't get jump promos until they were released in like special editions and stuff. So it was a yearly subscription jump promo. So the EU version of this format is the exact same, but they don't have Gustav Max and they don't have Shockmaster.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess in that regard, I'll compare it to things that I'm familiar with. Super Smash Bros. Melee. In Melee, it's, really popular, blah, blah, blah. But essentially, Melee does get patched. There's a version of Melee that comes out in the EU. It is the patched version. Fox is nerfed. Random other characters are buffed, nerfed. For the most part, it's the same game, but there's little things that make it different. For example, Falco doesn't have a spike in the EU version.
What?
Yeah. He has all his down air is a meteor. What that means for anybody who doesn't know for Melee is that you can up B cancel it. So if Falco hits you with his down air at any %, you can cancel the hit stun by just doing instant up B, and you can get out of it. So various nerfs and buffs in that game. However, the vast majority of people that play Melee play in North America, and thus they just use the North American version because that's the version that we all have.
Right.
And so the people that in EU are forced to just play the NA format because it's like, well, that's the version that the entire player base plays. So that's the version that we're all going to play. That's the competitively accepted version of the game. I say all that to say it's even easier in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, especially if you're all playing on Dueling Book. EU is not limited to the fact that they don't have Shockmaster. So unless everybody really thinks Shockmaster is that toxic, hey guys, let's play by EU rules. To me, it would make sense that you just play the format that the majority of the player base is already a part of.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And we put it to a vote on the Discord, and people want Shockmaster so far.
Yeah.
I might host like one or two. Yeah, pretty drastically.
Can I ask a question?
I might host like one or two EU tournaments, but yeah, of course.
A quick question about this, because I remember Shockmaster being made in two ways. I remember the just Magician Shark outrageous advantage from just that combo alone. Then I remember this weird one that Hoban came up with that used Popular Paralative, the Xyz monster. Yep. Is this that?
Yeah, that's the format where you have to use Papal Operative to switch your rat to attack because you only have the one Zen Mighty. And there's also like a dirty combo where if you draw Tour Guide plus Shark, you can do it as well. The board's not as good, but it can still end Shockmaster. But yeah, so including both of those together, the math on doing it turn one is like just under 20%.
Okay,
so it's not very high.
Yeah.
And then like that has to be uninterrupted. And then a lot of times, if you don't have traps and you draw the combo, you don't even go for that combo because, like, your opponent can summon monsters that just beat over your monsters. So,
if you don't have a trap and they like summon a Guaiba, they attack over your carrier and then they just make like a Dolka or a Lagia and set some back row, then you're kind of hosed and you don't want to commit all your resources to do that, right?
Yeah, and like any hand trap stops the combo too. So,
yeah.
So this deck, it doesn't handle Hunter is still legal, like Wind Up Hunter.
Yeah, but with one carrier,
it doesn't work.
It can only loop 2 cards at most.
I think 2 cards, and then you waste your Zen Mighty, and people just decided that's not.
Yeah, you just end on Hunter if you go to loop 2 cards from their hand.
Hell no. Yeah, no, that doesn't. Yeah, ending on a 1600 vanilla monster is definitely not what I would consider like unfair. But let's talk about unfair. Dark World. Mm-hmm. So I listened to your podcast, listen to your tier list video with Hydro Pump. Shout out to Hydro Pump. Dark World definitely seems scary. I always think about 2011, where people just did not realize how good that deck actually was in Tangu format. Or like, I guess it's not considered Tangu format because Tangu is specifically before the Dark World structure deck is legal. It's before Columbus. It's only Toronto, really. But then during that same period of time, though, like where Billy won once, and then the second time when he won, Dark World was legal. I don't think it did well at that initial event. So people kind of just wrote it off as, oh, it's inconsistent, it's not that good, but people just didn't have a good build for it. I think in 2012, people have figured out a little bit more about how Dark World was, but even back then in 2012, people probably didn't know fully. And I know revisionist history is a thing in all retro formats, right? Like Frogs was not played in 2010 Edison. Like it was not played as a deck, and it is like the best deck right now. So I'm wondering, how do you guys feel about Dark World? I see it's S tier, so I get that you think it's really good, but obviously it has strengths and weaknesses. I just talked to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess, so first off, before I get into it, in that format, there was 4 YCSs, and at every single YCS, there was never more than 3 Dark Worlds that topped. So it wasn't like it was running rampant and like destroying top cuts, because the deck does have kind of this issue of you, similar to like Frog Hero, where you want to see like each part of your engine, you have to see Dark World monsters, you have to draw into trap cards, and you have to draw the cards that allow you to discard your Dark World monsters. And so the deck does brick sometimes where it just doesn't play and has non-games. Even worse so than a Frog deck would, because at least with Frogs you can play with just your Frog cards, you play with just your hero cards. Dark World can't do that. But secondly, there's so much side deck hate for Dark World, probably the most in the entire format, that a lot of people just opt not to play it because like if you get Gemini Imps, your turn can just end, and then you also just negged one into your opponent. Ooh. And they replace their Gemini Imps. If your opponent activates like goes first and activates like Macro or Shadow Imprisoning, and you don't specifically draw like MST or Heavy to clear it, you just can't play the game. So I think there's a lot of checks for it, but as an engine, especially game 1, it is a very terrifying deck, and very powerful. That's why we have an S tier, but I do think it's something that could quickly fall out, once the format develops.
So game 1 is kind of, it sounds like it is equivalent to Frogs in a way where it's kind of designed to win game 1 just by, you can't, I'm looking at your tier list, you can't main deck everything for all these decks. They all lose to different things. So you can't necessarily have a deck that's like, I'm good against all of them. You're going to have a bad matchup. You're going to have a deck that like, I don't want to see this, right? And you're saying that Dark World probably has a high chance of winning game 1, probably more than just a 50-50 or whatever. But then games 2 and 3, just like Frogs, the side deck against it is probably the best out of every other top deck in the format. Like, it just loses to a lot of different things. Macro and D-Fish are at 3 in this format. Shadow Mirror is obviously untouched, never been touched. And I don't know. I mean, it's probably good against hand traps, right? Like Veiler and Maxi don't really hurt Dark World. They've always had that strength of like Grapha doesn't give a fuck if you draw 1 card off of him being special summoned. But and then the viruses. Can we? Because like I don't know if people back then knew how broken. Like we know now because we're Edison players, right? We know that the viruses are not okay in Yu-Gi-Oh. Like they're just not. And I would argue that you could probably go back and like ruin every format or make every format a little bit more unpleasant by just playing viruses in the main deck and stuff like that. Sure. I did hear you guys bring up Eradicator. How do you feel about that, just for people listening to this podcast?
I personally think the viruses aren't as good as they are in Edison in this format. And like you saw historically people playing like 1 DDV and maybe 1 Eradicator on the side. I think Eradicator is just like generically good against a lot of the decks. But there's also like this format is very boss monster centric. So if you're playing against like agents or if you're playing against Chaos Dragons and you DDV them and they just like summon Hyperion, pop your gates, you're pretty cooked pretty fast. And it's good against Geargia. It's really good against Windup. But like certain matchups, Hero Beat normally doesn't care. They play like 7 monsters and most of them they get with searchable spells and traps. Chaos Dragons doesn't really care. I don't think Hieratics care. And not as good going second into bigger boards. So I think it's not as big as a problem as it is in Edison, where there's like no real way to check it.
So you said, it's interesting, I'm looking at the tier list again. S tier, Wind Up, Dark World, and there's this Geargia Karakuri deck. I don't remember this at all, so when we get to that, I can't wait. But you said that the Dark World deck, the viruses are like good against those other 2 S tier decks, Wind Ups and Geargia, which is kind of funny because if everything in tier 1.5 and below, I guess, didn't exist, then Dark World will be like, oh, I beat both of these other decks by just deck devying them, I assume is the card that like really ruins them. But because this format is like Edison, and there are so many decks, your bracket could be literally anything, especially early on. People don't know. There's no big 3 narrative yet. There's no like, this is the deck to play, or these are the decks to play. It's still wide open. People are going to try to play 6 Samurais, Gravekeepers, Rabbit, Heroes, Chaos Dragons, even Gadgets, right? There's so many decks in the format right now. So it's hard to... Viruses get better when people are all playing kind of the same type of decks. Like, everyone's playing a bunch of monsters that are really weak. Here's Deck Devi. Everyone's playing Gigavice and Frog OTK. Here's Epidemic Virus for spells, right? So basically right now it sounds like the format is still so wide open that the viruses don't mean as much just yet.
And that's one of the things about Dark World. It's more of like a theoretical S tier from us. If you look at the 4 YCSs that took place in the format, I think Dark World's had 1 top 8.
Yeah.
Out of like 4 events, they had 1 top 8.
Yeah,
as said,
and
people
never
hate
more
this
than
deck.
Right.
They side, like almost every side deck has like 2 or 3 Gemini imps and stuff. And if you're going and you have your viruses and stuff, the problem with Dark World is they also want to see their engine. As Marcus was saying, they can kind of brick. And if you have like your Grapha in hand and like 2 Dark Worlds and a Gates, and you activate Dealings and they imp you, your turn's over.
Yeah.
You can like summon a Dark World, but the viruses just contribute to more bricky hands, and it's not like you're really reliably first turn virusing people yet.
Right. Yeah, you don't even do that in Edison. I tell people all the time, the chance of opening up Grepher plus a pitch plus deck devy is 5%, which is really low. So 95% of the time your opponent will not turn 1 deck devy you even in Edison, so it's not like as crazy as people think. Anyway, so yeah, Dark World is good, but it's not that unpleasant. I will say it sounds like one of those matchups though, where when you play against Dark World, when you lose, it doesn't sound like it's under your control a lot.
Yeah,
that because like I remember, like, again, I played all these formats that are retro now, and I just remember whenever I would lose to a Dark World person, it did not feel like I could do anything. And every format has those kinds of decks, but you just sit there and they are bouncing Grapha, or they're summoning, summoning a monster, bouncing it and summoning Grapha over and over. They're skill draining you, so you're getting floodgated, like Dark Smog, all that nonsense. They're looking at your hand, they're ripping a card out of your hand with Drag Down to the Grave. It just feels like, yeah, I got fucking blown out. Like it's like the Lightsworn deck, right? Like Lightsworn and Edison. Sometimes you sit down in front of your opponent playing Lightsworn and you could be anybody, and they just mill the right way, they draw the right way, and this seems like the absolute best deck in the format, and you're like, damn, why am I not playing Lightsworn? And then you go to play Lightsworn, and then you realize that it's Lightsworn. Yeah, you draw the wolves, and you're like, yes, you can draw the wolves. That's right.
On that note, Obviously, you guys are playing this format because you think the format's really fun and engaging and all of that stuff. Similar to Edison and similar to like various formats, like Frazier said, how there's always like some kind of cancer toxic type deck where you don't feel like you can play. Is there any deck right now that maybe isn't S tier, but like could maybe be a problem with the right cooking that is like
Gishki.
Dragon Turbo or Gigavice or anything like that? Like a really toxic like combo, I kill you one turn, you didn't get to play?
I think I mentioned this in the video. I'm not sure if it was in this format, but I think you can make Geshki FTK.
Yeah, Gishki, you guys mentioned it, and it brought me back to Alan Pennington. I don't know the card pool of REDU format yet, so I'm still very new to just even understanding what this format has in it, and I am not the person to break formats really in terms of like.
Yeah, you got to call Chris Lynn.
You got to call. You get your Marcus LOLs, you get your Europeans and all that, and they'll figure out what how to really make things unfair. But Gishki it's always a threat whenever that deck is in the format. It's always a threat. But I will say there's not only are there a lot of decks and they all do very different things, but I feel like combo decks that are that streamlined to just combo get worse and worse as Yu-Gi-Oh goes on because there's more answers to them. So like this is 2012. There are more answers to combo decks now than there are like in 2010, for example, where Frog OTK goes first or Forks goes first. If they open up nuts, you just sit there and watch them. There's nothing for you to do.
You don't have hand traps. There's nothing to stop them.
Yeah. Funnily enough, if you max the Gishki deck, you do die. You get decked out because they special summon that many times. Yep. But, Veil of Timely Veil or something might be able to stop them and whatnot. So that's something that could happen. I don't doubt. This is 2 years after Edison, right? 2.5 years after Edison, actually, if we're being accurate. When the card pool gets bigger in Yu-Gi-Oh, that means there's more opportunities for things to go terribly wrong when you revisit them. And that's just like what the game is. The further out you go, so when you go to 2014 format, right, like people love Hat, the further out you go, the more you end up with a bigger card pool, which means that there's more opportunities for somebody to come up with something that is just not okay, not pleasant, not fun. That's just Yu-Gi-Oh! Like people are going to try to eventually make it where I'm playing by myself and you're not getting to play. But at the beginning of a format, or at the beginning of a format being popular anyway, you don't have that issue immediately. And I think that has a lot of promise because right now, if somebody opens up Lone Fire Supervise against you in Edison format, if they have a brain, you are not winning that game. Like you have to have drawn a very specific hand, and even then, they used 2 cards to create 5. You are going to you're gonna need so much. But yeah, I think that REDU format has a lot of promise, even with like so many decks having broken setups. It's fun. It just looks fun. I'm looking at your list of decks that are playable, and it's like it looks really fun. But speak to this Geargia Karakuri deck. I don't know anything about this one.
Yeah, so Geargia's came out in Return of the Duelist, and early on, a lot of people were playing it with Machina. Some people would play with Karakuri, but the ratios weren't really hashed out. And the deck does have a high ceiling, and it's still the same game plan of like sticking armor to the board. And it kind of stat checks a lot of the format because if they're not dropping boss monsters, like Windups just struggles to get over an armor, for example.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the big issues with Windups also is there's so many boss monster decks in this format, and they struggle against big just stats. So, but yeah, so with the Geargia Karakuri deck, the goal, because you have Gigant X, which probably the reason I like Geargia so much in this format is because you can tutor your main deck through your extra deck. But yeah, it has a combo because you're playing Birdman that allows you to get into the Karakuri engine. And then Geargia's being able to bounce Accelerator with Birdman special, book your armor back down, summon Burritos, switch it back face up. You can, it can like once you get going, like turn 3, 4, 5, if you can play through the back row, it can be very explosive. Crystal Blanc actually won YCS Providence with Geargia Karakuri. It was his first YCS win. And yeah, I just think it's very strong, very consistent deck. And it's one of the few decks that it doesn't have a ton of bad matchups in the format. Its worst matchup probably is Dark World, to be honest.
Yep.
But yeah, just very, very consistent. It's got a good extra deck. I like it because you get to play XYZs and Synchros, whereas a lot of decks are kind of more focused on one or the other in this format. So yeah, any additional comments, Pudding?
No, I think that's it. They don't have the Geargia gear, so any XYZ they make, they have to work for. Like you have to flip your armor, you have to get it to resolve.
That's huge.
It's a very fair deck in that way.
Yeah.
And as Marcus mentioned, the extra deck is ass. There is no way you remove a set armor without giving them their search.
You know what's funny?
Nothing.
I love when we revisit all these formats, and like a common thing is people say like the extra deck actually like sucks. Like you can't do all this, and that. But at at each of these formats, the extra deck was stronger than it ever was. Like as Yu-Gi-Oh progresses, the extra deck is more broken than it's ever been. But then when you look back, you're like, oh, the extra deck wasn't that good.
Yeah, people do say that a lot, and the extra deck is oftentimes one of the problems of the format. Or whatever.
By the time Synchro happens, every deck is extra deck. You know what I mean?
Yes, like GBs, which was the first ever extra deck, like the real one, not like Metamorphosis Goats, but like GBs was the first. I'm using my extra deck and abusing it. Then they made Synchros where everyone had a Jaizaras type card. Everyone had a boss monster that could summon on demand, and we never went back. Like we've been stuck in extra deck Yu-Gi-Oh since 2008. And you know, like you said, 2012, I'm sure that in REDU there are very broken Xyz monsters. The fact that there are Xyz monsters at all is cool though, because again, we play Edison. There are no Xyz. We just have Synchros. It's a Synchro format. This is, I want to say like early Xyz, right? Like this is still
very early. So I can actually go over like most of the rank 4 pools.
Yeah, please.
I'd say literally aside from Shockmaster, the only like really powerful considering XYZs are the ones that are like exclusive. So heroes get Blade Armor and Excalibur for the warrior types. Geargia get Geargigan, and so do Gadgets, which is nice, searchable fortress.
Yep.
Rabbit get Dolka and Lagia, which are obviously very good, but then you have to play vanillas, and now you have 2 rabbits, so opening first turn Lagia or Dolka is pretty hard.
Yeah.
And then the generic pool is Utopia Ray, you have Kachi Kochi Dragon, you have Evageshki Marrowgeist, you have Photon Papilloperative, which by the way was like a staple. People were like, this card is so good, I make this every day. And that card just fell off a cliff. You have Fairy King Alverditch, which again is like a really good card. Most people don't even know what the fuck that does.
What does it do? Because I am lost.
It's 2 level 4 Earths. And the reason you play it is if you attack into a Gores and they drop a Gores, you can make it and it drops all non-Earth monsters by 300 and it's 24. So it makes itself slightly bigger than Gores. Maystroke is probably the best 4 in the pool.
Yeah.
That's like generic, just because it can protect itself in Book of Moon stuff.
That's the 1800 monster or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, with a big butt. Yeah.
With a big butt. And then Gem Knight Pearl is played in a lot of decks because he's big enough to just crash or like attack over Light Pulsar.
There's attack thresholds in this format. So 2600 is a very good attack. I think anything bigger than Lagia is probably a good attack stat. Just correct me when I'm wrong, but Rabbit
25 is a big threshold.
25
you get
is
over like Fortress, you get over Light Pulsar, you get over Lagia, you get over Dolka, you get over a lot of things.
Would you say, Marcus? What would you?
Oh, Gigant X.
Oh yeah,
he's 23, so that it gets over that. Yep.
Yeah, so 25 is a good stat. And then diving into tier 1.5, where there are the most decks actually, right? Like there are more decks in tier 1.5. Same as Edison. Edison has a lot of tier 1.5s. We have like Diva Hero, you have Hero B, you have like your zombies, you have all of those decks. It's like Lightsworn and a bunch of stuff in tier 1.5. I'm not surprised that this tier list is kind of following the same idea, not intentionally, like you guys are just tiering it as they came up. But I'm looking at it, tier 1.5 is just like Edison. There's a lot of decks in there, which means in my head, the format is diverse because even if decks are like more powerful, they're probably not that much more powerful, right? Like the guys that you have in S tier, they're not like, you can't play anything else, you know? Like you can't play Hero Beat, you can't play Rabbit, you can't play Samurai, you can play all those decks. So your tier 1.5, I just like list out the decks that are here. I see GK, which is very interesting. I see the Inzektor deck, I see Agents, Samurai, Rabbit, Bubble Beat, I assume, and then there's also a Stratos Icon, which I guess that's like a different hero deck.
Beat.
Hero Beat. Right. So Bubble Beat, Hero Beat, and then you have the Machina Geargia deck, which you have a tier below the Karakuri one, and then at the top of tier 1.5, I don't know if this is like ordered specifically, but the top of it is Chaos Dragons. So talk about just like tier 1.5 as a whole. We don't have to go through every single deck, but like this is where the meat of a format is, in my opinion, in tier 1.5 of every retro format, is the decks that are like obviously the S tier decks or whatever, but then you also have the ones that are kind of competing, and if somebody crafts the right build, they could actually be better or up there with them. So yeah, talk about that a little.
Yeah, so I guess like a lot of the tier 1.5 decks are kind of in this boat where they might struggle a little bit with consistency, but when they play their game plan, they're just as good or better than the S tier decks. Like Inzektors, for example, going to 1 Hornet, 1 Dragonfly was a pretty big hit for the deck, and they don't have the ability to like tutor the main deck via the extra deck like windups do, right? So like that's like a big difference. But when Inzektors sees their engine, it's like as good or possibly even better than a lot of like S tier other 1.5 decks. But then a lot of the tier 1.5 decks are also like very similar in how they play. like Hero Beat, Dino Rabbit, Six Sams, all their goals like set up boss monster, play with trap cards, slow the pace of the game. And if you establish that boss monster, its attack threshold is better than what windups and Geargias typically put out. And they just play that style of play. Even the Machina Geargia deck kind of plays that way, where it's like trap cards. You play more starters because you now have the 3 gear frames in your deck. You're either establishing Gigant X or Fortress, and you're playing like this control game. So they do a lot of these tier 1.5 decks do the same thing, but they either suffer from consistency like slightly in comparison, or they just it's kind of like based on what the meta is looking like at the time can really influence how good it is for a specific event. So
yeah, your bracket matters a lot too. I heard you guys talk about Six Samurai won an event during this time, I believe.
Yep, Six Samurai won, and I think like S tier, I think Marcus also mentioned this, is kind of more tier 1. I don't think it's like the big 3 in Edison where they're like just miles ahead.
Yeah.
In this format, no single deck had more than 25% of the top cut.
That's good.
At all. Like, it's just not as like the decks are really close to each other.
Yeah.
And like random shit. Like I was playing Marcus, who's a very good player, obviously, and Evils had like a pretty damn good matchup against Windup.
Luke Feeney loves that deck.
I was getting cooked.
Yeah. Luke wants that deck to be good so bad. He talks about how when he was a kid during this time, 2012, he's one of the youngest people in our group. But he was talking about how like this is the deck that he was most fond of at that time. And, you know, it didn't really work out back then. People found better things to play, and it wasn't as, you know, now you have infinite time to figure it out, right? So you probably make it more consistent and better. Were you laughing, Kenny?
Because Luke is an amazing player.
He is.
Like, he's an amazing player. But I feel like you always got to be wary if Luke says he likes a deck, because he likes garb. Like he likes jank fucking like he really just likes terrible decks. Like I don't understand. He's an amazing player. When he plays good decks,
he likes playing at a handicap.
He's unstoppable. But he likes shit decks.
You know what's funny? Luke went to 2 events last year in Edison. He went to 2 events. He went to RB2 Maryland and he went to YCS Sacramento. I went to every event. He went to 2 events. And this motherfucker topped both of them with ease, mind you. He was playing against people. I'd be like, oh, you just played against this person. He was like, I have no idea who that is. And that shit would be so funny to me. I'm like, you just too old, like 10 foot. You just too old this person. You just played this guy. And he's like, yeah, I don't know any of these people. I'm just playing my Blackwing cards. Like he just Blackwinged everybody. Went X and 1 in every single tournament. It's just hilarious how good he is at card games. He's also known to be like good at other card games, stuff like that. But he is very fond of Evolzar. So as soon as I heard that name, I was like, oh, this is a format that he probably would play. Probably get some videos on the channel of him like using that against Tangu or something, because they like playing. They play so much Yu-Gi-Oh and different formats and stuff like that. Anyways, so yeah, I was seeing like the tier 1.5, and I think that comparing that format to Edison, because Marcus made the point of like, you know, there's a lot of different decks here, and I do think they're viable. Like, I think that is what makes the format fun and interactive when you can play all these different decks. But I was wondering about some of the more like staple spells and traps that are different from Edison. So I already listened to your tier list, but reiterate like what traps and what spells. I've just heard in this podcast only that Dark Hole's in this format. I didn't even know that card was in this format. So that changes things a lot. Yeah, Dark Hole makes you play so differently, but talk to like the spell and traps that are in this format that make them very different from Edison.
Do you want to do traps or spells? We can each do one.
Sure, yeah. You can go first. Take whichever you'd like.
I'll do spells, I guess, because there's not that many like very huge ones. There's the big 3, which is Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, Monster Reborn.
Oh
then
my
you got so there's a lot of fun power cards.
Yep.
By the way, priority is gone, so that's an important thing to note.
Oh, that's a huge distinction between the two. Yeah, so no priority. So yeah, I mean no priority. That's big.
3 MST. People play Lance. Lance is common. Avarice is at 1.
Lance is legal to begin with. Yep. Lance is a broken ass card in general, but yeah, Lance is legal in this format, whereas not in Edison.
And then Allure's at 1.
Auto Duality.
Upstart is at 3. Duality is at 2. Duality is at 2. Duality is very common. And those I think are like really the main big ones. E-Call's at 2. Hero Lives is at 2. I think those are the main big ones.
Mass change for the hero decks is pretty big.
What does go ahead, Dark Hole, Heavy, and Reborn feel in this format? Like, do you guys have games where you're like, fuck? Or is it just like, this is fine. Like, we have the cards to deal with it.
I kind of like that heavy's in the format personally because there's also 3 MST. So it's like
Yeah,
you
there's a
can't
lot
do
of
the
back
thing
row
like
hate.
other formats where you're just setting one and passing to play around heavy.
Right.
Because then your opponent could just blind MST. So like there's a lot more like risk calculation when you have to be aggressive and accept that risk. And like a lot of people will like choose to play Starlight Road or like chainables, I'm sure will become popular just like they did in Edison. There's some in this format already, but like it's far from being optimized. Like Frazier was saying, it's kind of in its infancy. So yeah, I actually like it. I feel like
Awesome.
the Monster Reborn and Dark Hole are like completely fine. Heavy's the only one I think that's arguably not fine sometimes, but
Heavy Storm
yeah.
defines entire formats. For people who
Yeah.
have not played as much Yu-Gi-Oh as I have, just going to rant a little bit about Heavy Storm. There is a very, very big mental difference between a format with Heavy and one without. For example, in 2011, when Heavy was banned, we were able to just set, like, X-Sabers was like one of the best decks, and it did miracles for Sean McCabe, for Billy Break, for everyone who played it. Even I got a fucking top with X-Sabers, but basically all I was doing was setting 4 Backrow, setting a Dark Soul or Ember's Blade, and literally your opponent would follow suit because that's just what the format was. They would set all their back row, and I'm like, draw, trap stun, flip up thing, synchro, make high on lane, pop all your back row. The way you play when you know that Heavy's not in a format, the way you deck build is you get to be as ridiculous as you want with traps. You can just set so many, and there's always a check to it in some way. Like Exciton Knight is in hat format. That's a format that doesn't have, I don't think it has Heavy Storm, or even if it does,
it does not.
No heavy.
no, right. So, okay, I am still, because it's hard to memorize all of the retro card pools, but Hat doesn't have heavy. And you can tell the way people play Hat. You see a Hat match and people go set armor, set 5, set armor, set 4, or whatever. And then the same thing with like 2011 formats where heavy was banned. You just can set everything and that's just accepted that you're just playing like that. But then when heavy isn't a format, you get what Marcus was talking about, where people are setting 1 back row at a time, or they set just 2. So that way, if heavy happens, it's not a complete blowout. It's annoying. It's not a complete blowout. I do think there is a conundrum though, where you have 3 MST and heavy storm. It's kind of like,
that's a lot. Yeah, that's the 3 MST and heavy sounds like so much.
yeah, if you're playing the odds, you're supposed to set more than 1, right? Like if you're just being strictly mathematical. Like if I don't know if people are just playing 3 MST in this format. You guys can.
Most people main like 2. I'd
Okay.
say 2 is more
Average.
common than 3.
Okay, so 3 is not as common. The third one's probably just side decked for when it's needed. Yeah, I do wonder about stuff like that, because what's annoying about MST, I was talking about Tangu for a second. MST, I think, is also like unlimited in Tangu format, and Heavy Storms in that format as well. They play very little traps. Usually, like the best decks in Tangu format play very little traps. It's like 2 warning. You get like Solemn Judgment, a Dustshoot, and sometimes a Mirror Force or a Call of the Hornet or whatever, a Torrential, something like that. But they play like 5 traps a lot of times. Aegis sometimes plays none but Treacherous. So then you run into this problem where if you're main decking back removal, it sucks against one of the best decks that is very common. And if you don't play it, then you end up getting fucking, losing to like the GK deck that is also a good deck in that format. And like you have problems with TGs and stuff like that. How do you guys feel about having so much back row removal in REDU format?
I think Marcus is going to get into this, but the reason there's so much back row removal is because the back row is fucking insane.
All right, so go into it.
Yeah, so let me hop into the trap cards, and I think it'll kind of help explain it a little bit.
Yep.
In this format, so I guess one of the big things similar to Tangu, we have Solemn Warning, but it's at 2. We have Solemn Judgment at 1. We have 2 Torrential Tribute. We have 2 Mirror Force. Compulse is in the format. Fiendish Chain is in the format. And like at this point in time, Compulse is, in my opinion, is the best trap card in this format.
How many
Because
do you
one,
have?
it is. I play 3 personally.
Oh, you have to. It's legal.
Yeah,
to
you
3.
can play 3.
Legal 3.
Yeah, I play 3 a lot because like it kind of fixes the MST heavy conundrum, because it's a card you can set that's a chainable. And because decks are way more consistent in this format, even if your opponent's just blind going into it, bouncing your own card a lot of times is really good. Like if you Tour Guide Summon to Sing and bounce Tour Guide, if you Machina Gear Frame or Stratos, bounce that back to your hand, you're going to get another search. But then if your opponent attempts to play, it's good to set into an established board. Because if they decide to MST or Compulse, you just chain it to their XYZ monster. And so that's why like blind MSTing isn't right a lot of times. And that was kind of discovered towards the end of this format as well. But the reason I kind of like the multiple MST and heavies is because the format is so diverse that you need like the generic removal for your Gravekeepers, for the targeted floodgates like Goes In and Rivalry and Macro. And yeah, I just think this format's crazy because like 2 Torrential, 2 Bottomless, 2 Mirror Force, Compulse at 3, like 2 Warning. There's just so many good trap cards, such a wide array of them, that it would be too similar to Hat if Heavy didn't exist, like you were kind of saying, where and the difference is in Hat, at least, people would be scared to MST or Backrow because the artifacts exist, right?
Yep.
Like they wouldn't like blindly Heavy or MST, but in this format, they would just always do it. So
Yeah.
I mean, I love when Heavy's legal. I think it makes the game. Now, granted, I'm not a big established player, but I feel like Heavy makes the game smarter most of the time.
I will say, in a way, I see what you're saying because, like I mentioned earlier in my example, people do just set everything, right? Like, there's no reason to hold anything if you think about it. When Heavy's gone, there's not usually a good reason. Obviously, there's nuance to everything. So take nothing what I say is like 100% you always set all your back row. But, because even in Hat format, like I said, there are checks. There's Exciton Knight. So you can get caught with your pants down if you set everything. But like in Redo format, there's no Exciton Knight yet. And Heavy MST at 3, so setting back rows is a decision which ones to set and how many to set, and I kind of think that's what you're saying anyway, Kenny. Is like, it's not brain dead. Like, well, I drew 4 traps. I'm playing Hat format. Set my artifact sanctum. Set my ignition. Set my moral tech. Set my fucking trap trick trap hole nightmare. Set my Geargia armor and pass or whatever. Like I just made up a Geargia artifact deck, I guess, but yeah, you get the idea. Like you just set them all. You don't really think about it.
Yeah.
So.
And Starlight's also popular in a lot of decks at like 1 or 2. So if there's times I'll set 4 without Starlight, but because it's prevalent in the format, my opponent's not just going to slam a Heavy Storm, and then you can play it like. And then there's also like cool interactions where you might get a read on a Starlight, you'll make a Solar Silver Mountain, target it, and then Heavy your opponent. There's like, I don't know, there's a lot of cool nuances that exist. So
yeah, I heard you say that the GK deck, which you do have in tier 1.5, plays like usually 2 Starlight Roads, and yeah, I mean that makes sense when you have double Mirror Force and double Torrential. Starlight triggers a lot more than it does in Edison, because I think it's bad in Edison right now.
Also, Starlight's fucking insane. Only in this format, the Gold Series 5 printing says it negates the activation, so you can damage step it.
What?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you like attack into a Fossil Dyna, you can Starlight Road to negate the Fossil Dyna.
Yeah, it's extra good in this format.
Oh wait, so Starlight Road got eroded in Yu-Gi-Oh?
It got eroded
at the very
Series 5?
next printing. Also, it's back to its normal rule. But yeah, for this set, for like a 5-month span, Starlight Road is crazy.
Wait, okay.
That's so insane.
Chat, hold on, chat. So Starlight Road was buffed for Redo format. Then it was turned back to normal after.
They were like, oops, we made a mistake, go back.
That is so funny. How does my body as a shield work? I don't think anyone plays it, but like, can you use it in damage step or no?
I think you can use it in damage step.
Yeah, because it does say activation on the card, which, that means you should be able to. That's interesting. So there are ruling differences. I don't know if you guys have it in your head already. I'm kind of putting you guys on the spot. Are there any other ruling differences? You said no priority. You telling me that Starlight Road can be used in the damage step. Are there any other big things that we should know about when it comes to Redo versus Edison?
Across formats specifically?
You said something about Necro Valley is really good in this format.
Yeah, it's like if you can imagine the best printing of Necro Valley that's existed in terms of like cards like that can't be used, it's in this format. Okay. So like your opponent's not rekindling you if you have Necro Valley on the field, for example.
I think it says you can't like move cards from the graveyards with effects other than themselves. So no rekindling, no red med, no none of that.
No
stuff.
Gigaplant.
Yep.
Doesn't work.
No Gigaplant.
Oh, I love that. Oh, Necro Valley's good, but then also,
GK's sneaky good in this format.
Yeah, you have it in a high tier, even though it's at the bottom of it, but it's there. And then you did say, and this makes sense, Dark World is an S tier, just staring at the GK deck. And so Royal Tribute is at 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Royal Tribute is a great card, but then if you play against Dark World and you don't know you're playing against Dark World, it is a fucking
you're in a bad
you just lose
time.
actually. Like you actually lose the game. It's actually so important to know who's on Dark World before you activate that card, because you will literally lose the game when they all activate both of their effects off of the Royal Tribute if you happen to have the 28% chance to open it. Probably higher because duality's in this format. How's Upstart? Is it in this format?
It is. Yeah, and so like Dark World's the main deck that played it, and then sometimes you would see like Heretic or Wind-Up decks try to play it as well, mostly just for like combo type of decks, because most decks can't really spit out 8K typically with any combos. Like it's not often, so they don't try to play combos that just straight kill you. So they're okay with just wanting the combo, establish a board and a hand, and like maybe one boss monster, like a Photon Strike Bouncer, for example, for Heretics when they play. So,
but wouldn't that? So you're saying that decks don't usually do 8K in this format like very often? Just
Not usually in a turn.
So-
I think the ones that can do it are Geargia Karakuri, Chaos Dragons if they open like fucking insane,
Yeah.
which is
Sporadics
very
if they
rare.
open insane. Yeah.
Sporadics and Bubble Beat. Bubble Beat is literally designed to just like set your entire hand, special Bubble Man, make Excalibur, detach 2, Miracle Fusion, and try and like swing for lethal.
So with that being said, then I feel like almost that's an argument for Upstart Goblin if decks don't deal 8,000. And the reason I say that is because in Edison, right, decks that deal 8,000, I'm thinking of Diva here, I'm thinking of Zombies, I'm thinking of decks like that. They do these like very specific combos that are normal to their deck, like, oh, Malicious plus Diva, you know, with a level 4 in the field is Brio plus Colossal Fighter plus Miracle Fusion equals Absolute Zero is huge. Colossal Fighter has Warriors in the graveyard, he's also big. Brio, Colossal, and a Zero is actually like 8,000. And Zombies have a very similar combo, and there's other decks in Edison format that do this like 8,000 thing. And if you happen to be at 9,000, now the opponent lives, and you know how it is with crackbacks. It's very easy to crack back. Even in Edison format, it's pretty easy to crack back. So what I'm saying is, I wonder if Upstart should be played more, because if the goal isn't even to 8,000 anyone anyway, the goal should just be consistency, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I don't have to worry about, you could be at 11,000, but if I'm in a better position, it doesn't matter that you were at 11,000. I took half your life, you're at 55 or whatever now. I just want to be able to play the game. And I think that one of the problems with Edison, but one of the things that makes Edison so great to people, whether they acknowledge this or realize this or not, is the inconsistency of that format. Mm-hmm. Edison is just an inconsistent mess of a format. Like all the decks. I don't care how powerful it is when it goes off. Frog OTK, Forgs, Gigavice. I've played those decks on Teach Me How to Cook. I played those decks on Master Disaster. I played those decks or whatever. Watch those decks be played by even the best people who made them and all that, right? Alistair, Marcus LOL, and like I've seen it all.
Right. And
they're just all inconsistent. Like Dragon Turbo, I watch Hydro Pump play it. I watch like Ghost Rider play it. They're all inconsistent. Mm-hmm. No matter what. And that's Edison format. Every deck is just inconsistent. Pudding has a broken ass fairy deck, but then sometimes we will play for a Patreon battle, and like he'll just literally show me at the end of a duel where he didn't do a single thing. He'll be like, I had Endrise, Christia, Chaos Sorcerer, and I'm like, damn, like you didn't do a single play. Yeah, Solar Purity, and I'm like that. But when he plays, like you said earlier, Marcus, when these decks go off and when they actually play, they stand up to like the big three or the whatever, right? Like they're on the same level, if not better, when they get to play. Like I'd argue that Christia being summoned is like better than anything that can do, really, because it cuts off everything. But is redo format mostly inconsistent as well? Does it have that allure of like, I can play this deck and it's not the best deck or anything like that, but I can get there? Like, does it have that I can get there feeling to it?
Yes, yeah. I definitely think so. But one of a little bit different than Edison is I feel like every deck can get there, similar to Edison, but one of the beauties of redo is I feel like the decks in general are much more consistent, because at this point in time, like every deck, because it's more archetype streamlined at this point in time, every deck kind of has search cards for the decks that you're playing, or like some busted card to get to your better cards if you can trigger its ability, right? Like Eclipse Wyvern getting you to your Red MD, right, in the Chaos Dragon deck. Or like I was saying, Inzektors have their one Dragonfly, but Centipede can get you to Dragonfly. And then Machina Geargia has Machina Gearframe and the Geargia card, so you have 9 different cards that can tutor parts of your engine. Windups have their Windup Factory, and they have Zen Mighty. Gig and X exist, making gadgets way better, because if you protect a gadget for a turn, now you're not sitting on tiny guys anymore. So like I feel like every deck is more consistent, so you have less games where you just don't play and get destroyed by your opponent. Right. And that's like at Niagara, for example, one of the rounds I lost playing the Pudding Fairy deck was I game 3 open a hand of triple Christia, double Soul Impurity, and Endrise. And like my bad hands in this format are like never like that, even if you're playing a combo deck. Like I could have just normal summoned a tour guide, and that's a way to play for a lot of decks. You know what I mean? So
well, what I think about the format in general is I think it's a lot easier to get there, but what happens when you get there is a lot less extreme than Edison. Like as said, there's no priority. So if you like set up your grave and you drop a big Dark Arm Dragon, it's not like an Edison where it's a guaranteed +1 and you blow up a back row and they don't chain anything. If you're just like bottomless or TT, or if you're playing windups and you're like, oh, I got Magician Shark and they have 2 sets and one of them's a torrential, if you full combo into that, you lose the game. So most of the time you're like, I'm just going to summon a rabbit and kind of like try and get a little bit of advantage every turn because I don't want to die.
All right, I'm a chill.
You also have room to poke. You can like, if you think they have a torrential set, you have room to wait. Like, I'll draw my MST eventually, and like if I have a read on what the torrential is, so you have room to like poke and play around and wait to like combo off. So that's actually cool too, with how the different cards are interacting with each other. But the real question is, how good is GBs? I see you have GBs pretty low.
There's always that guy.
But, you know,
there's always that guy.
Beast, there's someone that's playing this format right now that thinks GBs can do it. So
his name is Johnson Balls.
Okay, Murray made me aware that they have Hero Lives. I didn't realize they had Hero Lives.
You see?
For
God damn it.
For Prisma, but I still think it's mid.
Did we mention there's double torrential, double bottomless, double mirror forest, triple D prison, double warning? Like, how's that deck ever connecting in the battle phase?
Yo, GBs, man. This is during the time when every format, every ban list, people would immediately be like, oh my God, GBs are back. And I'm sure in 2012 they did the same thing, even though it was 5 years after GB's prime. But that's just Yu-Gi-Oh players. Yeah, GBs.
I remember a guy playing GB at YCS Seattle in 2015 Necros format, and he's like, this is the shit. And Bestie was still at 1.
He was
still like convinced that the deck was like better than Necros and like Shadalls and stuff like that.
I think that exact YCS you're talking to, the Necros one, the premiere of Necros, was one of the most dominant showings from a premiere deck of all time. It had like 28 decks in top 32 or something crazy like that were actually Necros.
Because the judges were so dumb, bro. They ruled that Kaleidoscope sends us at a cost, so people would be playing against like Klee and BA in the second best decks, and they'd go like activate Kaleidoscope, send my Herald as a cost when they chain Emptiness. Emptiness resolves, MST your other back row.
Oh,
they get the search off the Herald and they just kill you.
Yeah. So, the only other dominant premier deck that I can really think of like that, at least in top 32 era, not top 16 era, was Bosch, Pepe. Like Pepe Bosch had
21 out of 32.
29 out of 32, yeah. And the other 3 decks were 1 Monarch deck, 1 Domain Monarch deck, and then Cosmo. It was like, or maybe it was 2 Domain Monarchs and 1 Cosmo or something, the inverse. But
it was a BA Monarch, I think.
There you go.
Domain Monarch, and then
Cosmo. Every other deck was a Pepe Bosch like Pendulum Performa Pile deck, and that was so dominant for a deck that had just came out, and it also got an emergency ban list.
Oh, immediately.
For context. But go ahead, Marcus.
For context for that event, I was just going to say I played BA at that event, went X2. I started off 1 and 2, and I wanted to drop, and Frazier's like, no, dude, you're winning out, you're topping this event, just believe in yourself. So I went out, he's like, the stars aligned, and then I get like 34th or something. I was like,
no, not
do you
34th.
Not remember that?
I do remember telling you to stay in. I do remember because you were way younger, obviously. You know, you're like a good 10 years younger than me, so I was like, stay in it or whatever, like you can do this, and I was trying to keep a positive mindset for you, but clearly. Well, look at this though. You ended up winning that same year, right?
Later that year. Yeah,
so I will tell you, this is a great time to segue into my own experience at YCS Edison or SJC Edison. I got 35th place at Edison. Most people don't know this because I was a nobody back then, right? I had no tops to my name. I had a bunch of regional tops, so I was known in my area, but like on a worldwide scale, no one knew who the fuck I was. And
that was me.
Yeah, and I got 35th, and I was obviously destroyed. Then Konami takes over because this is during the hostile period of UDE changing over to Konami. And the first ever YCS Virginia 2010, which is when we all should have been playing Frog OTK, but nobody really knew. People were focused on Infernity and shit like that and X-Sabers. Anyway, I played that event and I got 34th. And that was right after SJC Edison. So I got 35th and 34th. No one ever knows, but if somebody ever has a standing sheet, I don't know, somebody has to have a picture of it. I've been wanting to see it for so long. But if you look at a standing sheet of those 2 YCSs, I have 35th and 34th place. This is before I ever topped. And then that same year, YCS Atlanta happens and I win. And it sounds like I told you to stay in it, and you stayed in it, and you went X2, you didn't top, you got one of those terrible places, 34th, 35th, 36th, whatever, 33rd, obviously is uber terrible, and then you end up winning at YCS anyway. So I think it's like a rite of passage for some of us. Some of us have to go through that.
Yeah, it was funny too, because at that, I know I've mentioned this before, but at that very next YCS, round 2, you're like, let me look at your deck. I was like, what? You're looking through it, you're like, yeah, you're going to win this event. And like, obviously it's all jokes, I thought. And then we're in Top Cut, and I remember you saying to me, like, dang, because you also topped that same event.
I did, yeah.
You're like, dang, I wish you weren't here because I wanted to win this one.
Yeah, I've played the 51 card deck, and I was like, I think I could genuinely win this event with my homebrew. And it was meant for you, though. I knew it was meant for you, and it'd just be like that. But
Oh,
So-
is that the event you were playing that nonsense?
Yeah, Metal Specters. Deck I literally made, and I was told by the great Shu Ping, who was my sensei at the time, because I had been like on and off with Yu-Gi-Oh, so I wasn't fully invested. And Shu Ping, who was like newer to the Philadelphia scene, he was going to Drexel College, and he was like, you know, telling me the ropes of what's going on in the format. He plays OCG and TCG, and he was like, do not play this. This is 51 cards. It's fucking 2 engines. I was playing Metal Foes and Magic Specters. I was playing Ties of the Brethren, I think is the name of that card. Something like that.
It just came out.
Yeah, it just came out, and I was the guy who liked to top with different things just to show that like I'm not a one-trick pony. I can do what I want. And I was like, yeah, I made this deck. I think it's a fun deck. I think it's a good deck. And he was like, absolutely not. And then we went to the event, and I ended up getting top 16 with that deck. And it's the only time ever in Top Cut I got a game loss in my entire career, and it was because I forgot to write Big Eye on my deck list. So my deck list had 14 cards. Yeah, I was tired. I was tired. I put 14 cards on the deck list, didn't write a 15th card. The judge deck checks me, sees the Big Eye in there. I was like, oh, you don't actually have this written down. It's your game loss. And it just sucked. But other than that, I've been pretty decent on getting my deck list right, except last year with Nationals where I didn't get to play. But anyway.
So also in that Top Cut, I remember when they came back, and I could tell you were upset, and you told me I got a game loss. And I was like, because of a card in the extra deck, I was like, what card? And you were like, don't say, like, I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
Because you still had to play your opponent.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because he doesn't know what I don't have yet. But yeah, exactly. I still had to play, games 2 and 3 or whatever. It was so funnily enough, I played another Yu-Gi-Oh legend, but he wasn't at the time yet. It was Cody Angeloff, who ended up going on a crazy fucking tear the following year where he won Nationals, won YCS, I'm pretty sure, topped a whole bunch of shit. Like, he just went on an absolute fucking tear after that happened.
Yeah, 2018, 2019, Cody was absurd.
Yes, like that time period. No, I wasn't playing Yu-Gi-Oh at all. So all I could remember was, oh, this is the guy I played the last time I topped, and I got a game loss against him, and he won. And I could tell he was a good player and everything like that. But then he just became like one of the biggest names ever and like one of the best players ever and all that stuff. So that was really interesting to see. Like, damn. Also, by the way, that's my last ever YCS top. The one where you won, yeah, that's my outside of Ultimate Time Wizard stuff, right? But that's my last real main event YCS top. Period. Like I stopped playing the game after that.
It's crazy to think that your last like major event that you topped was in 2016, because like my whole come up through Yu-Gi-Oh, you were one of like the perennial figures. So it's just like weird to be like, dang, that was 9 years ago, bro.
I know, it's just so absurd. Like, yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh is just the history of the game.
He was done.
Had to get out.
It was all Edison's fault. Edison roped him back in, but he was
I was genuinely done. I was done for 5 years.
Entered my
You're
prime.
never done. You're never done with Yu-Gi-Oh. It always brings you back.
Yeah,
I remember us going, just like hanging out at AU a couple times, and this is before Edison was being played, and us like Sean McCabe like trying to play whatever modern shit was out.
Yeah. Oh my god, I forgot about that. Yo, Sean did try to play modern in 2021.
Sean was trying to play some whatever random modern shit was out, and we're just like laughing at him. And he was playing against, I think, Trap Eater, and fucking he was like doing a combo, and he didn't know what any of the cards did. He was like, I mean, it's whatever. Like, you let me know if I can stop it, because I'm not reading those cards.
Modern is so funny because Sean would pick up one of the cards from Modern. He would start to read it for fake. You know how people pick up a card and they're like, they don't really read it, they scan it. He looked at it, saw the body of text, and just put the card back on the field and was like, all right, so continue. And I just was like, yo, you didn't read that. And he just started laughing. I was like, you didn't fucking read that. I was like, Jared, you can do whatever you want. That man did not read that card. And then Sean picked the card back up. I was like, don't fucking pick it up now. Don't fucking act like you're going to read it now. You didn't read it the first time.
What's that copy pasta? Like, I'm either happy for you or sorry that happened, but like, I'm not reading all that.
Yeah.
Bro, when I got into tier limit format, because I tried to come back for like YCS Mini 2022.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started, I would just believe what people told me, because every card had like 4 effects. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go into time. So I'm like,
bro. Continue.
That's why I felt for a Master Duel. Like, I was trying to play Master Duel, and I was like, dude, there's just too many. There's so many decks that were viable too, and like they all had a paragraph of text. Like, I was reading Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh to me is so much more intense with the card text and how many effects they have and how many decks are viable. Maybe not as much anymore, but I remember maybe like 2 years ago there was probably 14 decks that were actually all topping and doing well. Yeah.
But what's fucked up is, even if they're less viable, they're all broken. So maybe they're not actually viable to win a tournament, but there's 14 decks that are broken, And if you don't know what that deck does, it can just fucking roll you. Because it's just like...
You're right, Kenny. That was the problem. So basically what I'm referring to is the Cyflock period of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where like every deck could Cyflock you. And that just wasn't pleasant. I know we're like so off on a tangent right now, but just kind of thinking about modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And comparing it to, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! That we... Redo format actually does resemble, like comparing it to modern and stuff, it resembles old Yu-Gi-Oh! Still. This is not, we're not so far gone that setting a monster gets you killed, right? Like you can't do that in modern.
I was watching Stango and Luke play, and like they were playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Like it looked really fun.
Yeah, flipping cards, negating cards, like yeah.
I was talking with.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. I know we're still on a tangent, but I just wanted to say it's so funny because when I just wanted to make this video because I like this format, and like I was like, it's a format no one plays. It's not gonna amount to anything probably, but like Pudding and I were talking about it at Niagara, I think, and that's how I found out he even liked it.
Yeah, he loves it. Pudding is the first person to tell me about it.
I played it a little bit during COVID in the Cincinnati area because I was like, what, just the format that everyone chose to play, I guess. But it's so weird to me because I remember seeing all these videos about how Edison gatekeeps all these other formats. I have received nothing but positive support from like everyone in the Edison community. Like, oh, dude, this is so cool. Like, yeah, if I'm not playing Edison, I'm definitely down to try. Like, how do people experience
I'll tell you what
maybe the format's just pretty good, and and maybe that is the actual reason. It's not because it's being pushed by some agenda.
I'm telling you, no matter how many endorsements a format gets, if it's bad, people will stop playing it very quickly. Like it will be a flash in the pan. This is no shade to any formatters or anything, but like people are, I do not believe that marketing, that CMO and MBT or whoever, I do not believe that those guys are dictating what we play in this game. No. They might make you aware of it. It still doesn't dictate. Like if somebody plays Edison, they don't have a good time and they just don't like it, they're not going to continue to play it. It's just not going to make every event have 300 people or whatever. It's just not.
The other thing is just the toxicity of it. Like some people, like you get into a format, like I remember when like some hat stuff was happening, like people would come into our live streams or whatever and they would ask Frazier like, hey, what do you think about hat? And he was just like, I'm not interested right now. And then it would turn into this thing like Frazier's gatekeeping hat format, like he doesn't want it to succeed, and he hates it. And he's like, no, I said like go off, play what you love, play what you want to play. I'm just not interested right now. Like I don't what do you want from me?
Yeah, like, people get mad if
I'm
you
not
say
interested
that they don't
right now. And then when he played it and he was giving shine to it and making videos on it, they're like, oh, now he
they were so mad. They couldn't please them.
There's all this hate and shit, and it's like, bro, just like be cool. Like just be cool and everything will work out. Like I don't understand.
I forgot that Kenny can see all the comments on the channel too, because we both on it. But it's so funny.
I like Cat, but a lot of people like will bring up complaints and I can't really like argue it other than saying like, well, play it. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. So I'm like, oh, Infernity combo is not as bad as you think. Oh, Soul Charge isn't as bad as you think. Like, oh, Vanity, you probably don't lose the Vanities that often. You probably, you know, like I do that a lot. Like, oh, Sylvans aren't as crazy, but then they'll do their end board like without a Soul Charge and you're like, oh, this deck's absurd. And like with this format, the only complaints I've ever heard is how often are you going to get shock locked? And then people just hate Dark Worlds. But
yeah.
People don't like getting their hand touched. But one of the things that I've noticed is nice is whenever we play this format, people are like, stand by, you got anything? And Dustshoot is gone.
Oh, Dustshoot is
there's no more getting Dustsshooted in the standby phase, which is nice.
So that's a big distinction between Redo format and Edison. We're back on Redo. Mm-hmm. So yeah, in 2012 September format, Dustshoot is banned.
Yep.
That's good. Because
that card.
Yeah, me and Kenny, when we played Master Disaster, you guys probably haven't seen this video yet, or I think it already happened in the first Gigavice one where Kenny was piloting and I was backseating. We like drew a really good hand. Like Lone Fire was in it, and then we had 5 spells, and we got Dustshoot to turn 1. We went second, and I literally said if we went first, this is an auto win hand. It had Supervise and Lone Fire in it, and everything else was just gas.
And even going second, we only really lost to Dustshoot.
We only lost. I was like, if it's anything else, we actually just continue because it was like Lone Fire, Miracle Fertilizer plus Supervise. So even if like we summon it, he goes like, you know, stop it or something, like bottomless the Giga Plan or something, right? Next turn I'm just gonna go Miracle Fertilizer, do it again. But we got Dustshoot it, and then people watched. We bricked after that. Like we never drew another playable. We didn't draw a playable hand from that point forward in that game. It was very unpleasant.
It was definitely toxic too, because we definitely had a hand where like if we went uncontested, it was toxic for him. We just win and there's nothing he can do.
That was
then because he had Dustshoot, it was toxic for us because there's nothing we could do. And I was like, we're just
that was the self-awareness, because I do like to be self-aware with Yu-Gi-Oh, especially at my age. I'm too old to act like I deserve to win, even if I open broken or whatever, or what. Like for no reason do I think that I just deserve to win, even if my opponent misplays. I'm just I've grown so much in this game. The game has been so good to me my time playing it, that I just accept my losses. I accept that formats have their flaws. Every single format has flaws. There's just like, if anyone tells you otherwise, they are lying to you. Every format has flaws. Every format has pros to it. Every format is good to someone. But just being able to take like self-awareness into context here, like, yes, our hand, if we got to play, our opponent would not have played.
Yeah.
Like in that same video, when we finally do lone fire supervise somebody, the guy quits. He doesn't even let us finish because where it was going wasn't fun to him. He was going to sit there and watch us play modern Yu-Gi-Oh basically. And yeah, like you said, the biggest question in REDU right now is like, oh, do I get shock locked or whatever, or do I get like dark worlded, which is, you know, that's the same as getting ice warned to me. It's like they just milled a bunch of because they still need to like things need to line up. They need to see the grapha. They need to see this, see that. It's like, yeah, if they don't line up, then the deck looks pretty mid. But if they do mill their wolves instead of drawing them, then the deck is broken.
I have a question about your tier list. Is there any? So you guys, obviously, this tier list you guys made, blah blah blah. Is there any of these like mid tier decks, like these tier 2 decks, that you think are like, oh, actually, this deck might be broken?
You stole my question. I was going to ask that later. That's good.
I'll let Pudding answer it because I think we kind of addressed it a bit, but
I think there's a few decks that are actually, I think psychics have a lot of potential. Like Etelly just got unlimited. I think there's a lot of things people can work with. I think Evils are actually pretty good. They make more consistent first turn Gyrodolka than Dino Rabbit does, in my opinion. And they just have like a decent engine. Like, yeah, you don't want to draw the dinosaurs, but one's a 19 beater, so it's like drawing a Sabersaurus. And the other, like the 1900 defense guy that just specials one from deck. You bring out the 1900 guy, he becomes 21. He can run over a Thunder King and then search. Doesn't even need to send to grave, so he's like a Guaiba, which is really nice. I think frogs have potential. They don't have Substitoad, but Treeborn is still really good. 3 enemy control in this format is insane.
Is brain control in the format?
No brain control.
Oh, no, that's another big difference.
That's another thing I really like about the format. Most of the unfair cards, like the spells and traps, are ones that everybody plays and they don't feel as game defining. Like Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, Reborn, they don't feel like a sacky to lose to in a way.
Yeah.
It's something like brain control.
A lot of decks, their boards don't like lose to Dark Hole. Like if you have Zen Mains up and your opponent Dark Holes you, if you have Maze Stroke up, if you have Light Pulsar, you're going to special summon a Dark Dragon. If you have Gigan X, you get to bring back a level 3 from Gigan X effect, one of the
Shining at your heroes.
Yeah, Shining gets your heroes. So like a lot of Dark Holes like just elongate the game. Like the amount of times in our testing with me and Pudding, it just comes down to where both of us have like 2 cards and it turns into this like grindy top deck type of game. And I don't know, I kind of like that. A lot of games just get to that point over and over and over. So literally our first video we did, we one shoot our videos for our duels, and I was playing GKs and he was on the Trooper Agent deck, and our games were all pretty good, and our third game literally got to the point where we're both at like 1 card top decking. Like I top deck a normal summon and punch into a deep prison, then he top decks and sets a monster. I top deck normal monster, punch, and then he's searching a card. Like I don't know, I like it a lot.
It has like some of the best simplified game states out of any format, I'd say. The simplified game states, they come often because of the power level of the traps, and they're very, very entertaining.
Interesting. So would you say this format is like kind of top deck resistant, where like it's less likely that you just lose the game? Because you said brain control's not in the game, but I'm using brain control as the example. It happens less where like, oh, I'm losing, there's nothing I can do, I top deck brain control win. Would you say this format's a bit resistant to just like a top deck card wins you the game?
I'd say so in a way that top decks are less impactful in that way.
Yeah.
And I'd say like if you top deck like a BLS, yes, it's a great card. If you've grinded your opponent down all their resources, it can win you the game. Right. But like if you have 1 trap, that BLS is not doing anything. It can't priority banish.
Yeah, no priority banish is huge.
Is huge. Mm-hmm. Same with Dark Arms, same with a lot of those power cards. Also, like none of the boss monsters, Zen Mains is a card, and you just make a Zen Mains. A lot of people make a Zen Mains and like just stall a few turns. Because there's no way to reliably get rid of a Zen Mains. You don't have
Tempo is not in this format?
Which one?
It is.
Tempo
is. Yep.
Tempo is, but it takes 2 turns.
Okay. So for people who don't have Tempo,
detach.
Tempo is a Xyz that detaches from your opponent's cards, or I think it might be able to detach from yours too, but I know it detaches your opponent's shit. And it gets bigger every time it detaches a card. So it gets up to like 2,700 or something like that.
But it's once per turn.
Right.
So you can only use it once to detach 1 material. And then the Zen Main still has 2 chump blocks on it.
Isn't it once?
So you normally detach
turn,
1,
though?
and then you pass to their turn, and then you can detach the second material.
Right.
But you're still sacrificing a turn to get over that Zen Main.
Right. So it's like when you summon it, no priority, but summon it, detach, take a material off your guy, then pass. Then I can do it again on your turn, take a material. So your guy loses all his materials before you even get to touch it again, which is like, I remember that card being, I felt like a good player when I summoned Tim Tempo. Like when I got to a situation where it's like, okay, it's time to summon Tim Tempo and like steal the materials off his guy or take them off his guy. That play always made me feel so good about myself because like I grinded down to a point where like now I'm making this shitty card good. Like,
Yep.
like
Yeah,
this-
that's what I was saying.
27 in this format is such a big number.
Yes.
The 4 pool does not get over it.
Yeah, the extra deck's all like dirty outs to boards. It's nothing's like a clean answer. That's why I was saying we don't have Diamond Direwolf to just like hit something on the board. We don't have Castell to spin something away. We don't have Dweller to just answer the graveyard. Like everything you're doing is like a convoluted way to out like specific cards or deal with specific situations.
Where's Scrap Dragon in this format? It's legal, right?
Yep.
But it's not easily made.
Yeah, because not a lot of decks are playing tuners. There's like only decks that can commit to synchro summoning can really even do it.
That's
so
right.
Like your psychic deck will, right? That's why I like the Geargia Karakuri deck is because you get access to that card, whereas a lot of other decks don't.
Right.
But yeah.
You just reminded me of something. So not to cut you off, but Konami, whenever they release a new like game mechanic, like Exceed summoning, they fucking destroy or just power creep the old one. So you're saying, I was like, what do you mean decks don't play tuners? And I'm looking at these decks like, oh wait, the top decks really aren't tuning to make their bosses. They're mostly just either in the main deck like Grapha, or there's some Exceeds monster like Windups and Geargia and Karakuri. Like a lot of times they're just not synchroing. Now, Karakuri is the one, but like a lot of times the top decks are not Exceed summoning because they wanted us to move away from synchroing because they were selling us Exceeds monsters. I completely forgot.
It'll take 5-10 years before they start making good synchros again. Like they move away from
Brio
synchros
just got
and
banned
then
too.
Yeah, Brio got banned, but honestly, the power level of the synchros is higher than the power level of the XYZs.
Yeah, they just make them.
That the engines don't have like reliable access to synchro.
Right, they power creep like the engine, right? So like the wind-up engine, you started off this podcast saying that engine is basically the most robust and the best engine in the entire format, essentially, when you just look at
that
it.
engine can't synchro.
But that engine can't, it just does not synchro. And they did that on purpose. They knew they were making windups fucking ridiculous. Magician is a TCG exclusive, so is Windup Rabbit. They made those cards, or maybe a Shark. I think it's Shark and Rabbit are exclusive. That's what it is. Magician is not. But they made Shark and they made Rabbit, and they just literally created a monster with that wind-up deck. And they also at the same time were like, we don't want you guys worried about synchros because we're selling you Exceeds for the next several years. And then after that, we're selling you Pendulums. And when Pendulums came out with Cleafort, dear God, like it was just so broken. And then after that was like Metal Foes, and that deck, if you were playing an Exceeds deck or like in a synchro deck, good luck, because I'm pending for 5, bro. I'm summoning 5. I'm pending for 5, and it better be warning. Like if it's literally anything but or strike, it better be a solemn card. If it's not, I literally can do this next turn if you don't kill me. And like it just power creeps. Lynx came out, and then Lynx destroyed. Like the new Master Rule destroyed everything, and now you couldn't do anything without summoning a Link monster. You had to summon a Link to even touch the other guys, really. So yeah, I forgot about that. This format is not very like synchro heavy. It's an Exceeds format for real.
It's like there are a lot of XYZ decks, but the synchro decks are pretty good. That's like it's one of those nice transition periods where it's not like later on, like past Dragon Ruler format where the XYZs are just fully dominant. You have 6 Sams. Yep. You have the Geargia Karakuri, you have the Psychics, you still have a lot of pretty viable synchro strategies. And cards like a Naturia Beast, just like you're playing Dark Worlds, they make a Nat Beast, you die. Like you're dead. You're cooked. Yeah. Xian is amazing in the format, 2500 that negates the powerful spells or traps.
What is Six Samurai
Karakuri engine?
What is Six Samurai missing in terms of like
one gateway, I think 2 smoke signal this format.
Oh, is Xian also at 1 at this point?
Yes, Xian is limited.
Yep.
Okay, so 1 Xian, 2 smoke signal, 1 gateway. Mm-hmm. So I remember hearing you guys say if they open up gateway, it's like GG lights out type vibes. It's just too much.
But if they go second, triple MST, trap cards can kind of like make it so it's not an auto win.
Yeah. Also, I don't mind a 1 of. Like I would love Edison if Black Whirlwind was at 1. Honestly, like it would just be a more pleasant format. Because Whirlwind, everyone complains Whirlwind or Whirlwind whatever. It's like so broken. And if it was just at 1, sure, it would be annoying. But it's only 15% that you open up a 1 of, not including upstarts and stuff like that. But 15% you open up a 1 of, less than 28% by a good margin. Less pleasant games. That also means that the good players will hold their Whirlwind correctly, like Matt Kalinda, and the ones who aren't so good will just slam it and get it fucked up by Raiko MST or whatever. So yeah, I like the idea of one gateway, not making it too much for this Samurai deck. You have them in 1.5. That's probably fair. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of decks here. And what I think is also cool, these decks aren't in Edison. Like, some of them are, but like not really. Like, most of these decks are just new decks. So if you're just looking for a change of pace or just a change of like, I'm tired of seeing Black Wings and Value and Frogs. I'm tired of seeing now the Gigavice or whatever, Frog OTK, whatever you're tired of seeing. If you play this format, you literally get access to like some of the most storied archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Like, so these are some of the most beloved archetypes. People love windups. People love Inzektors. I don't know what psychos do, but I'm sure they exist. People love samurais and stuff like that. Oh God, not Inzektors. Out of the big four in 2012, I remember like before everything is nerfed, I had that shit at 4. I did not like it. I hated that deck.
I mean, you're probably right, but like when it does its unfair thing, it's still crazy unfair. And it's like when I was getting good at Yu-Gi-Oh, that was the deck I was playing. Like that's how I started learning like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh at like an actual competitive level. So
you know what made me mad?
I'd say it's less like degenerate in this format. Inzektors' main game plan is like you have Hornet Dragonfly, sure you're popping off, but you have like Centipede Ladybug. Like Centipede becomes the core of the deck instead of the one of Dragonfly.
Yeah.
Because it's just like in a format that's this slow, just being able to equip Hornet, pop a card, search a card is like insane. Or make like an instant 24 beater with a Gigamantis.
What made me hate Inzektors so much in 2012 when it came out was I started to understand Yu-Gi-Oh concepts at a better level, and I realized that punished you for playing the game. And that concept pissed me off so bad because that was just GBs in disguise. Literally, from just playing the game, right? You're playing against Inzektor, and you commit cards to the field, they fucking pop them and they gain advantage for doing it. Just like Bestiary and Marmelo, basically. And if you don't play the game, people realize that I can OTK you now because there was like that sword Inzektors card. There was that the 2400 big one, and you can equip those and like do this crazy combo that literally does 8,000. So once people realize that you either commit to the field and lose by advantage, or you don't commit to the field and you take massive damage, if not literally get OTK'd, that made me despise Inzektors so much, and I became a macro rabbit player. I just hated the deck so much.
Fair. The other thing is by Nats at that point, it really just came down to like what, and the reason I agree Inzektors at 4 is because every deck turned into what insane thing can I do turn 1 to just lock my opponent out of the game, and Inzektors didn't have that like every other deck, because like you said, it responded to your opponent attempting to play.
Yes.
Whereas like windups looped your hand, Chaos Dragons made a board that you basically could never clear. It would just all come back always. And they also, if they resolve Future Fusion, like they're up like 8 cards somehow.
Rabbit just was Lagia Dolka.
Yeah, Rabbit. Yep, Macro. Yep, exactly. And Inzektors couldn't lock you out. They were still trying to basically, they would choose to go first, but they're basically choosing to play second. And they just couldn't into any of those decks. So I agree. It was at 4. That's 2012.
I remember 13 years ago. Look at that. I'm not that old yet. But yeah, redo format, man. I think it's a cool new format to try out. I'm hoping that it will see a lot more success because some of these formats have a flash in a pan effect where they kind of pop up and then nobody really supports it that much. Or the people who do support it spend most of their time hating on Edison, and so it just kind of draws people. I don't think it draws people in. I think it makes them kind of go look at Edison because like, why are you talking about Edison on your channel that's not an Edison channel, right? So now I know you're going to be focused on this a lot. I might dabble in it. Just like I said, Stango and Luke, they play this shit all the time. And I never record them, but I might just be like, I'm just going to cut the camera on while you guys play. Like, do what you do. I'll just cut the camera on and then upload it to YouTube and see what happens. Like, see how people respond to that. And then I know you guys are like about to be hosting some tournaments and stuff like that. I would love to see how that goes as well. That should be interesting.
Yeah. The thing about this format. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we also have like a series coming out to show people, and me, Pudding, and Hydro Pump are all kind of like collaborating on each other's channels to try to like have multiple channels and people just showing off this format. Eric Shen absolutely loves this format. He wants to start promoting it at some point, he said as well, probably after Nats though, because his focus, like my focus, is even still on Edison. I'm going to that Florida tournament at the end of this month, and then I'm going to Houston right after. So like, but like I just love this format, and I'm not trying to replace Edison because I love Edison, but if I can push this format and have this format also be, played and beloved by people, then heck yeah, let's do it.
There's room for more than one. I mean, Edison exists after GOATs, right? There's room for more than one, and at the moment, I mean, with Dueling Book, it's all free. You don't got to buy cards. I mean,
right.
Obviously, people are going to want to buy paper cards and play in person, but with Dueling Book, every format has a chance of being like teased out. It just is a matter of whether or not the format really is nice and fun and consistent to play over the course of a whole year. Whether or not like the bullshit that happens to you feels so bad that you're like, I don't fucking feel like playing this. I'm gonna just go back to Edison or Goat or Modern or Magic the Gathering. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah,
for sure.
I mean, it looks fun though. It looks cool. I like that there's seemingly actually diversity. Whereas like I think Tango format is really fun, but I do think the diversity in that format's a little fake.
Yeah,
Mm.
3 decks.
I
And
agree.
think, like really, like the top decks are the top decks, and like when you say that the other decks are viable, it's not true.
Yeah, no shade, but like I 100% agree. I played Tengu. First of all, I played actual Tengu during the time period, and then I revisited it when Konami announced the 3v3 last year, and I played it again, and I was like, bro, I don't see a difference. Like, like the best decks, and the deck that actually won the YCS last year was Tengu Plants, right? The best decks were Agents and Tengu back then, and I played it again, and I was like, the best decks are still these two. I'm confused. Like, sure, maybe Hero Beat is a little bit more viable than people remember it being in 2011, actually, but I don't think Hero Beat is on the level of 3 Hyperion, Triple Tour Guide, BLS. Like, I also,
Christia's.
yeah, like Christia. I also don't think it's on a level of I'm trishing you on your turn. I'm doing all kinds of tricks on it with Librarian and you get the idea. My point is that while Edison and Hat and like REDU and stuff like that, these formats are kind of more wide open. I do feel like Tangu format is still Tangu format.
Yeah, it's really fun. Like those decks are fun to play. It's really fun. I just don't tell me that it's diverse. That's all.
And don't lie to me and say that those decks aren't that good anymore. Like I think that's more so the issue than saying that you think a different deck is the best deck is one thing. Sure, you could believe whatever you want, but then saying that Aegis and Tengu aren't even that good in Tengu format is fucking crazy. Like that is just lying. That is just actually lying to people. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, it's funny.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I was in Cairo's Tengu War League last year.
Yeah.
And at first it was diverse. Like everyone was playing different decks. But by the end of the season, it was like 70% fairies, 20% plants.
I remember looking at that.
And then if you weren't playing that, you're just playing like GK because it actually was decent into those two decks, even though it sucked against like the random stuff.
Yep. Yep. Now that became the format. So,
that War League.
Also, as much as I don't mind the decks, one of the things about Tengu is the more I play it, a lot of the engine feels so similar. Like the 3 Tour Guide Sangan is present in like every deck.
Yeah.
That's good, and it does the same thing. You just like overlay for Levier, or you leave your Sangan out. The Thunder Kings are on like most of the decks. Like a lot of the cards are very generic.
Yeah, double warning. Yeah, Gores. Yeah,
double warning Gores. It's very like, and the one thing I like about this is Tour Guide feels very unique. Like the decks that play Tour Guide all play Tour Guide for a different reason.
And REDU, you mean, right?
Yeah, and it's not quite as strong. I still like Tengu, but I'm on that for the YCS because one of my teammates only plays Edison for the 3v3. So I've been having fun with it, but it is, I don't know. I just don't like it quite as much as Edison.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. And that's the thing. There's room for all of it. And whichever ones people enjoy the most will be the ones that people keep playing.
Yeah.
So it's like no amount of anyone's hate or like at the end of the day, if people enjoy playing it, they're going to play it. So just like play the formats that you're having fun playing. And if everybody else is also having fun, it'll get bigger. If not, it'll just be like a little pocket community. And that's cool too.
And rotation is nice. It's nice to be able to rotate between formats. It keeps the ones you're playing feeling fresh.
Yeah.
If you play Edison like 3 times a week, every week, you're probably going to get tired of just like playing very similar matchups eventually. You get burnt out. If you play Edison like once a month or something, it'll be more exciting when you come back to it. Same with Tengu, same with a lot of other formats. I think multiple formats being popular is very healthy for the like future of UTW Yu-Gi-Oh.
You mentioned rotation. And I know Konami fucking hates the idea of rotation for card pools in terms of like how Pokemon and Magic do it. Just because I almost feel like they hate it just because another game is doing it. They don't want to seem like they did it after. But
yeah,
I do think
they're both Wizards games too. Like,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure Pokemon is made by Wizards. The card game is made by Wizards of the Coast. Or it used to be.
I have no idea.
Used to be.
Okay.
They lost the license, I think, like 2002, 2003, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a direct competitor to Yu-Gi-Oh for sure, Wizards, or at least it used to be. But what I was going to say is, I think rotation in the context of rotating the Ultimate Time Wizard format, and I brought this up a long time ago, and I'm still standing by it. I would love if every year, like, give it a lot of time to prep or whatever, but like, give us a a forecast saying 2025 is the year of Tangu. 2026 is the year of Hat. 2027 is the year of Redo or whatever, right? Like whatever Konami could decide. I think it would be fantastic to just have a year where like they switch over to format, but they give you enough time to actually get the cards. Because again, it's not Ultimate Time Wizards are not Dueling Book. We don't have all the cards, so I need to get all the cards. You can't tell me what the format is 2 weeks before the Ultimate Time Wizard and expect me to go get a Redo deck. That doesn't work. You need to tell me in many months in advance, honestly, so I could test the decks I want and all that.
Would be cool because it's called Ultimate Time Wizard, right? But in reality, it's just Edison format, and then once a year they do a 3v3 that has Goat and Tangu.
Yeah, I'm mad. He doesn't even play it. He knows exactly how it is.
Like that. But that's what it is. It's just Edison. It's not an Ultimate Time Wizard. It's not going through time and playing all
No, it's not. Formats. It's one.
So it would be cool if, like you said, they rotate it and they do something like, let's say all 2024 was Edison. Let's say 6 months before 2025, they were like, by the way, next year is Hat.
Yes.
Like, we're doing Hat
that
format.
Would be amazing.
Like, they wouldn't call it Hat. They'd call it like whatever.
Yeah, they call it whatever they want to call
whatever
it.
ban list. But like 6 months ahead of time, 2025 is Hat. And then 6 months into 2025, they're like, hey, next year we're going to be doing like a lot of, Redo gets popular or Tangu or, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome because then it actually feels like you're going through time and you're playing through the legacy of these Yu-Gi-Oh formats. Yeah. And I think people would, and then once again, how does Konami make money? They just fucking reprint the cards. Hey, we're redoing fucking Burning Abyss.
Yeah.
Here's a reprint of a bunch of Burning Abyss cards. Oh, look, Konami made money again. Like,
yeah, no, you're right.
Also, imagine if you're like a player who really enjoys Edison and let's say it shifts to Tengu for a year. As soon as it comes back to Edison, you're going to be fucking pumped.
Yeah.
You're going to go to that event. You're going to like make the time to go to that event.
Also, the more they establish it, more, then they could do, 2-3 years from now, the season could be 2 different formats. Hey, there's a side event for Edison and there's a side event for Hat at the same fucking Ultimate Time Wizard event. Like, it could just, there's a lot of room for growth and they haven't much, like, I'm thankful that they did Ultimate Time Wizard to begin with.
Yeah.
I feel like they haven't really experimented much after that other than the once a year 3v3.
Yeah, it seems to be way too numbers based, which I don't like that. It's the chicken or the egg thing. So Konami says the format is Edison. So then most people are probably going to play Edison just because that's what Konami is kind of dictating to us. And that goes back to like the marketing thing or whatever. Like I do think in my heart of hearts that Konami at the end of the day, they are the biggest contributor to like what people are going to play. Obviously if the format is not that good, people just won't play it because attendance drops even in modern Yu-Gi-Oh when people don't like the format. They just stop going to YCSs, right? So I'm not backpedaling on my argument of people are going to play what they want. And when the format's bad, people stop showing up and they notice. Anyway, to the point though, like if Konami said the next Ultimate Time Wizard or the Ultimate Time Wizard in September is going to be Redo format. Guess what? Redo format is not only going to get a lot of steam from the content creators at that point, but the actual player base, the people who matter, are going to play it, and they're going to decide if they like it or not. And I imagine they probably will like it because it seems like a very fun format that is like not catastrophic yet. So yeah, people will play it, and then that will grow the format because Konami starts from the top. Like they are the top dog.
Oh, yeah. That's another thing.
It's an initial investment though. I was just going to say it's initial investment. Like right now, like when we started with Edison Ultimate Time Wizards, we had a lot of like 150 player events, right? Now it's like pretty consistently around 300. I think they fear that if they switch to a new format, let's say the first couple events aren't going to be like as big as Edison is currently.
Edison event was 280 people and it was supposed to be capped.
That was the Nats, right?
That was the first
500.
Yeah,
Nats was huge.
Well, last year's Nats was the first Nats, the one that Kalinda won in 2023. The first ever Ultimate Time Wizard was 280 people. I do think that if you change the format because of the initial hype, because people love hype. Humans, the human brain is like, yo, did you hear the next Ultimate Time Wizard's hat that everyone online is talking about? Everyone on socials, I'm making content for it. Fucking everybody's probably making content for it, except like the people who are diehard Edison people. I don't live or die by a format. I'm a human. I'm allowed to change. So like I'll make content for it. You guys will probably make like everybody will be like, oh, hat's the thing they're doing. Let's make some content for it.
It'll be exciting. 2 things I wanted to say. One was you don't even have to commit to a whole year. You're going to say all of 2025 is Redo or Hat. You can literally, this requires like, obviously this requires a budget and planning or whatever, but they could go, okay, here's the schedule for 2025. these 3 months is this, these 3 months are that. Or like each of these YCSs is like this format, that. And then you give people time. Okay, I'm going to plan for this, that. I can get this whatever card pool. The other thing to what Marcus was saying, what if they're worried because Edison was already kind of established by the time they did it? Okay, they could do Ultimate Time Wizard, continue to have like Edison for now be like the guy on top. But then when you do your little 8-man pods, you just make the pods something else. Oh, these pods are redo. And if they end up getting steam, then you can, okay, these pods did well enough. We can have it be like a bigger tournament and do redo or hat or Tangu or whatever the fuck else somebody wants to play. Just start doing like these little pods for these other formats. It's called Ultimate Time Wizard. Let us go through time.
Yeah. Or the day 2 giant card, even like if they made that a different format to just, test the waters for specific ones. Like if they announced that in advance, I would go to, if they said next event, we'll do redo as our day 2, I would still play an Edison, but like I would be hyped if I get knocked out, because then I'm immediately like, all right, I got this other cool, really big event for another format I really like to focus on. So
yeah, you're right. I think what it sounds like we're all agreeing on here, and the main point is that these things just need to be communicated like in advance.
Yeah. Bro, for YCS Vegas, dude, they didn't announce the formats until after we booked our flights. We did not know until like 3 weeks out what the formats were going to be.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to play hat, too bad. Hat's not on it. People thought it was going to be hat. No hat.
We need to talk to a Konami insider. We got to get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Their lack of announcements, the whole reason I'm not going to Vegas, actually. So
yeah, I don't even know if I'm playing in Vegas. I don't have a team. There's a chance Vegas is just there's a chance that Vegas is just a vacation for me. I'm already looking at Grand Canyon trips and shit like that. Like I genuinely might not play in Vegas at all. And I'm not even.
I know a friend who's looking for a team. He joined last minute and he said he'll play any format. So if you want to play,
I'm still
Frazier you out to him.
Wants to be with people he really, really likes.
No, that's not true.
With, right?
I thought that was true, but look at what happened to me last year.
That's true.
And it's not that I don't like the guys who I teamed up with last year, but I didn't really know them like that. Like I just teamed up with them because they had really, really fucking good resumes, and we were like, this is a power team. I mean, going into the event, everyone was like, the teams I can see winning this. Yeah, people I wasn't even saying it. Like people were like, that team is crazy. If you just look at our resumes, me, Raikoko, and AJT, our resumes in the fucking retro Yu-Gi-Oh are cracked out of this world. And it just crashed and burned because honestly, not even disregard the specifics of what happened. I do think that there is something about like having real synergy with the person, the real chemistry with the team that you're playing on. I think that actually does matter. Sure. Like I genuinely do think that communicating with someone and knowing how to, like I know how to talk to Stango, I know how to talk to Luke, I know how to talk to True Hero, and they know how to talk to me. And like some people can't handle the way I am, right? And I get that. Like I have a very strong personality. I'm a very like, I can be an asshole. And the way I talk to people, some people are just like way more emotional. They don't know how to take my words and stuff like that. And I don't know that if I don't know you like that. I'm just on the team with you and I might say something that you might be offended. Now you can't play straight. I don't need that. If I say something to Stango or a True Hero, they might be annoyed with me, but they lock in. They know that's just how this fucker is. They use a stronger F word, but they get me. Like they understand me, and like we have real chemistry because we've been friends for fucking decades. So it works out. Whereas again, I don't know how to communicate with this guy. I don't, so
right. I don't know, and the pressure is different too. Yeah. I mean, the pressure would be different if I was playing with like two gods of other formats. And I would feel like I can't be the one who does bad. And like, then I'm going to have that in the back of my mind rather than just like locking. But if I'm playing with like Eric and Chai or something, like I'm homies with those guys. Yeah. Honestly, we're probably going to be yapping while we're playing, but like, I'm still gonna be locked in because I want to do good for them, but it's just a different type of, I want to do good for them because my friends, not because there's pressure on me to do be the one to. And that's why it's so crazy. You guys had the most absurd team. So when I heard about how your guys' run went, I was like, there's no way. There's just no way that's possible.
We got fucking scraped.
That's crazy. It's like the most like it doesn't even.
It's like LeBron, Steph, and what's the guy? Not Kevin Durant. It's like those three guys on one team. You'd be like, oh my god, they're gonna stop, and then they get fucking destroyed by like the Pelicans or something.
Yeah, first round of playoffs against some random team.
Yeah, they just get bopped.
This doesn't make sense.
You're like, how did this happen? Like, yeah. So that's just kind of how I'm feeling about it. I'm still going. I'm still booked. And I actually booked a hotel that is very, very, very nice. It's like $1,000. It is $1,000. It is $1,000. Because I'm treating this as a vacation more than a Yu-Gi-Oh event. And I actually plan to like utilize the facilities and like actually have fun in case I just don't even play in the tournament on Saturday, Sunday. I'm also there Thursday, Friday, and Monday. So I'm there for a while. So most of the days I'm there anyway, I'm not going to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh because there is no Yu-Gi-Oh on Thursday, Friday, or Monday.
Right.
And so like I was like, you know what, let me actually shift my mindset on how I'm treating this trip. I still know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Like I still am locked in when I play and all that stuff, but I've done so much in Edison and in this format that I wanted to do, and it's not the biggest deal for me if I miss an event now as opposed to like back then.
And luckily, based on last year, no one's expecting me to do good at the 3v3 anyway.
See, there you go.
No shot.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what team you throw him on. If he's sitting in the center, I mean, you got to be like a threat no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's the thing.
How does that work, by the way?
Player B
the
is
center
the
person
Edison.
can give advice, right? But how do you determine that? Like, is it based on formats? Who's in the center? Because what if there's one person in the center?
So I'll explain very briefly how the 3v3 works. Player A is Goat, player B is Edison, player C is Tangu, and literally, obviously, the player Bs are playing each other, the Edison players are playing each other. So yeah, the person in the middle can talk to both people, right? But you can't just start talking constantly while you're in the middle of a match and your opponent needs your attention. You can't like literally coach. Like I can't have Stengo to my left, and if he doesn't know how to do something, I'm just like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And my opponent's looking at me like, yo, I'm activating bottomless. And like, I do need to know if you have a fucking response or like what's going on here. You can't just like completely derail your own game to coach the other guy.
Yeah.
But when you are done, though, and this is the broken part, if I'm done and I'm the middle player, and this is why your strongest player theoretically should be in the middle, but if I'm done and I'm in the middle, I can literally now coach Stengo, and it's just fair game. Like I can literally tell him like, no, do not set that. Do not set that. Like do this, do that, whatever. And that's just how that works.
I think another good point Frazier made, though, because like Marcus said, put Frazier in the middle. And where I do mostly agree with that, I think something Frazier said is important in that, listen, I've known Frazier since 2010. He's a dick, all right? So you put him, like he said, you put him with two other people that aren't really, like they just know Frazier, but they're not used to Frazier. If he's trying to coach them and they're doing something, you know what I mean? Like, he might talk to them in a way that completely shuts them down, and they end up playing really bad and their face gets red.
Yeah,
and,
some people can handle.
He's not like being an asshole, so to speak. Like I think there's a difference between a dick and an asshole, and at least in what I'm saying.
I've been triggered by Frazier before.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, what I'm saying though is that like he might talk to you like you're a fucking child.
No, you don't. Yeah.
But it's not because he actually is like trying to disrespect you. It's just like it's like the game. It's the competition.
One of my friends that I'm going with is exactly like that. I love the guy and he's so blunt. It's funny. We're like at like the regionals watching a pod and he sees somebody misplay. And the guy like picks up his cards and he's upset because he loses in the final. And my friend goes up. He's like, "So this is why you lost? Like you fucked up there. You fucked up there. You fucked up there."
That's me. That is
language in some ways.
It is. It is because I care. It's like when Gary played in a tournament yesterday. Both Garys played in a tournament, but Gary Yu played in a tournament yesterday, and he was at an invitation on Maryland. Feel Good Gaming. Shout out to them. And he played against Yi Chang Lee, who's also a pretty good Edison player. And like in one of the duels, it was streamed. In one of the duels, I was watching it as I was playing Monster Hunter. In one of the duels, Gary has a Dark Arm Greffer, and he has the choice to make a level A Synchro. His opponent's playing Machina Control. So Yi Chang's playing Machina Control. This is like game 3. So this is for everything. And they're going into time. And Gary makes a Stardust Dragon. So he has Stardust, Dark Arm, Greffer. He's playing against Machina Control. And immediately, I go, that should be a Thought Ruler. Like I said it immediately. I was like, that should be a Thought Ruler. And then next turn, Yi Ching draws Avarice, slams the Avarice, draws Gear Frame, summon Gear Frame, get Force, discard Force, summon Fortress, crash into Stardust, kill Dark Arm, and Gary loses the whole match. And when he got the chance to talk to me again, I was like, hey, you fucked up here. Like, this is what you did wrong. I was like, you played the rest of the matches that I saw on stream really well. Like, he 2-0'd the Hero Frog guy. He 2-0'd a couple people, actually. He just beat them really bad. Punished their misplays and all that. But when he played against Yi Ching, I was like, this is what you could have done better. And he was like, oh, yeah, like, that makes sense. But the way I say things, I'm just trying to help. I am not trying to say this to stroke my own ego. I'm not trying to say this because I'm just an asshole and I want to point out your flaws. I'm saying this because this is something that I want you to improve upon because you could be better. I believe in you. I think that you could be better than you are. And I could also too. And if you see me do something wrong, please tell me. Like, that's what I want from my friends. Hold me accountable. And I hold my friends accountable. I'm always going to. That's just how I am. And if you don't like that, you're probably not my friend.
And it's true because you've literally said in the past that like you aren't the type of person to like sit there and want to hear someone's game, or if you watch the game, tell them about what they could do. Because like you are only ever doing that if you actually like really, really care about that person. So
yeah, if I don't care, I'll just let you do whatever you want to do and fuck up, and I'll just kind of be like, Like that's
Yeah, they'll complain about being sacked, but and sure, they got lucky to get that Avarice, but you could have prevented losing in that spot regardless.
Yep. So that's just, but yeah, Vegas should be fun with regardless of if I play or not. Putting good luck to you and your team. It sounds like you already have things figured out. What format are you playing?
I'm on Tangu. One of my friends is newer. It only plays Edison, so he's on Edison. So I'm playing Tangu.
Yeah.
I think I've cooked.
Okay, I can't wait to see. That's actually that's good.
Cook.
You cooked an Edison. You cooked an Edison King. So I would not doubt it. And if that's the cool thing about the 3v3, if somebody does cook a deck, I think the only opportunity is really Tangu because Goats is cooked, and Edison is kind of super established. So I think
Goats is super cooked.
Am I wrong? Like Goats
no, it's overcooked. It's burnt, bro.
Yeah, burnt. Yeah, like Goats is overcooked. Edison is super established, and then Tangu has a pool that is not fully explored and not like flushed out as much. So I think if any deck, or I should say, if any format could be broken for just one event, I think Tangu has the highest chance of being broken for an event.
For sure.
I honestly think I've cooked. I feel like this is better than anything I've made in Edison. So
yeah,
I'm excited to see it play out.
Yeah, now I'm low key like hoping you do really well because I want the deck profile.
Hope so too. Fingers crossed. Marcus knows what I'm playing. I've already sent him the list.
I'll show up on Sunday to get. I'll be if I show up a little drunk on Sunday, then you know what it is. But yeah, I mean, thank you guys for stopping by the channel and discussing redoing Yu-Gi-Oh in general and just like the future retro formats. I think that people should try it out. If you haven't yet, try out redo format. How did the name come about again? You said at the beginning, but it's like the redo word.
So duelist, right?
Yeah, it's Return of the Duelist. In the format library, official name is Wind Up format. And whenever you mention Wind Up format, people are like, "Oh shit, I'm going to get hand looped." This is fucking awful.
That's what I would think.
That's what most people think, and they think Wind Up is like some tier 0 super threat.
Yeah.
And then literally you like tell people about the format, and you're like, "Oh, it's this," and they're like, "Oh, I played that back in the day. I love going to locals back then." I think I was talking to Marcus. My locals was the busiest it's ever been during this format. And it seems like a lot of people, when you actually tell them the decks in the format and tell them what was viable, remember it positively.
Yeah.
Like very positively.
It's
so
like,
I think Wind Up is just a bad name for the format.
It's post Wind Up. Like it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in the format, but like literally at the last YCS of the format, 0 windups in top 8. 0 of them. So it's not, I don't know how you can call a format like a specific name of a deck format if there's even a single YCS where 0 of them made top 8.
Right, because at least in Tengu format, all the events were won by Tengu plants. Like in actual Tengu format, Billy won both the tournaments.
Yeah. Before we leave, one of my favorite things about this is it's so cool finally being in a format where the like digital age of YouTubing just started. There's so much like content with the exploring cell phone cameras and shit.
Yeah.
Everybody has deck lists, everybody has everything. And it's so like fun to watch these videos of people like 13 years ago talking about their tournament experience, because Edison was kind of just like at the cutoff of that, where people weren't doing deck profiles, and the huge like Pro Winston, Vexicus, who's in your stream a bunch of the time.
Yep.
Like so many big YouTubers were huge at this time, Yugitubers. And that's like one of the funnest things. There's so many resources for it online that it's enjoyable.
There's so many small ones too. Like the amount of videos I've watched in the last couple of weeks with like 50 views from 2012 is hilarious.
That's awesome.
Nothing like a good 50 view video shot on a Nokia flip phone.
Yeah.
I know exactly what kind of videos you're talking about. The camera's shaking and shit. He can't hold that thing still for
OG
nothing.
iPhones.
Yeah.
OG iPhones.
He can't hold that damn camera still for a damn thing. That shit is shaky. Okay.
All right, registered Hypercam 3 recording Dueling Network.
What a time. Kenny, you were about to say something or no?
No, I don't. If I was, I don't remember.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I'm going to read out the names of our Patreon. Again, thank you guys for stopping by. I'm going to do this real quick, and then we'll do shout-outs for you guys, and then we'll kind of conclude from there. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I think that you guys will really love this, especially on YouTube, but this podcast is also available, like all of our podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere that you listen to podcasts. The IMNerd podcast is probably there. Without further ado, let's give a shout-out to people that are party member or higher tier on Patreon. We have Wyvern Milk at the Spot in the Woods.
Oh, no.
Leon, Quest, Xavier, This Ain't God, This is Stanley Earl, The Sultan of Slot, Dom, Dragon Ruler of the Side Events, Gabe Marini, Ari Reynolds, First to Home, Big Man Blastoise, shout out to Hydro Pump. He's also the person who was in the tier list video with these guys. Vincenzo, Dallas Bailey, KJ, Fair Bear Flash, Sarah Maria, Alex Ahern, FT Campa, Edison Club, Trying to get flued out. Gores in my prison pocket. Sugal, Vicky Venomon, Elijah Barfall, Tyler Tadeo, Volvita Mega Monarch. Delgado 2028. I say all this to say vote for me. Janitor 215, Thomas Rue, Joshua Carroll, Eric Chai, Brian Moore, Behind the Duelist podcast with Ty and Justin, Mike and John, and then we have
Free Tim Bailey in the chair like Eisen, Nod Win, Frozen Go Dojo, B Dog 23, Phil and Poister, Romeo Snyder of Team Hugh, Tyler Frasher, Daniel Anderson, Deroa, Chicken Toast Strudel, Jordan Eastman, Robert Light, Klanger, Pavinci, Travis Slur, Scores on My Lap, HC19, Gregory Kalmering, Limp Biscuit, Jigsaw, Mike and John, Froggo, Anthony Japov, Michael Zhang, Tonjik, Tyler, Neos is my alias, Chris Louie, Bob Cuddy, and Peyton Capel.
Thank you guys again. We appreciate every single one of you. It's a fucking long list of people to read out at the end of every episode, but we do it every time because we love you and we appreciate all that you do. Marcus, Pudding, would you like to do any shout outs before we conclude this episode officially?
Shout outs to Marcus and Hydro and everybody who's helping me get this format off the ground. I'm just really happy that there's interest in it. And yeah, we have a Discord now. So if you want to join the Discord, if you want to play for fun, hop on in.
All right. Also, I will put a link to the Discord server. So send me the link to your Discord server, and I will put that in the description of the podcast. So no matter where you're at on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you'll be able to click that link. Even on like Spotify and stuff, you can click it. That should get you into the REDU server. And I'll link Marcus's channel, Metaphos. Again, subscribe to him. So yeah, we got that. Marcus, did you want to say anything else or?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say it's awesome that you guys still read off all those. I would have thought by now with how many you guys have that you would not. So yeah, I mean, that is dope. But yeah, for shout out to you guys for giving us this platform, first of all, to like help promote this format. Anyone who says Edison players push it down is just complete lie, because I've only experienced the exact opposite. Shout out to Pudding. He just created a channel, and he's going to have some awesome content for 2012, and I'm assuming other things as well. And Hydro Pump, because he's a big part of wanting to push this format. And then shout out Chicagoland, because all these guys, even though we're like one of the bigger Edison communities, all these guys are loving this format. And I just want to give everyone a heads up. You probably want to start investing now if you're wanting to play REDU, because a lot of things are already going up. Like Ulti-Papal Operative went from like $18 to like $40 already.
Yeah, so that's going to happen to Market Watch for sure.
Rest of the formats like dirt cheap though. Like the Jump Shock Master promo that was literally like a yearly subscription. You had to subscribe for a year, is like under $15. Ulti Bubble Mans are cheap. Secret First Rabbits are dirt cheap. Like a lot of the format is still very affordable. So if you're interested in it, like jump in. You can buy a Max Rarity Extra Deck for maybe a bit more than $100 now, but still really cheap.
I want to say this too as an ending note. While Marcus Hayden and Pudding here play REDU for good, Hydro plays it for bad. So that man,
hold on, but Hydro plays. I think Hydro plays for evil.
Like, he does. Like Hydro is trying to play Dark World.
Like Edison, he's evil.
I'm just warning y'all that there's an imposter. There's a fucking Hydro Pump is there to play Infernity and Dark World. Okay, he comes into formats with the sole intention of fucking them up. So while y'all play it for good, he plays it for bad. And I just want that to be known. There's an imposter literally among y'all. So yeah.
There's a thing in the Discord, there's a dragon channel, and somebody's like, oh, thank God there's no Dragon Turbo in this format. And then Hydro replied with like a frog doing like a thinking face.
Listen,
fuck with him.
That man, So, just there's a mole.
Shout out to y'all though. Thanks for the kind words. You guys are awesome. And yeah, it sounds like you're just having fun, so it's cool. It's awesome. I love it.
And with that being said, guys, as I always say, do the things that make you happy, including enjoying other retro formats without having to shit on other ones. Crazy concept.
Hell yeah.
Peace.
Peace.